is Monday, February 22nd, 2021, and I am introducing the 6 p.m. study session on the Civic Center campus facilities conceptual design. But first we'll have some comments from our city clerk about our meeting format.
This meeting is being held by video conference with no physical location open to the public. The public can observe and participate in this meeting via the Zoom link provided in the agenda or by phone to the dial-in number and the webinar ID provided in the agenda. The meeting may also be observed on live local TV channel 26 or online at www.cityofpacifica.org/livestream. For this meeting, live verbal public comments may be made through participation by Zoom. Members of the public can use the raise hand feature to indicate that you wish to speak on an agenda item or during oral communications during the regular meeting when the mayor calls upon the item. For those participating by phone, use *9 to raise your hand to request to speak. The city clerk will call upon speakers at the appropriate time, and you can unmute yourself to talk after being called by your screen name or the last 4 digits of your phone number. Please clearly state your full name for the record at the start of your public comment. Written email public comments won't be read during the meeting, but will be made part of the written record and provided to council members. The format of the meeting may be altered or the meeting may be canceled if needed. You may check on the status of the meeting by visiting the city's website at www.cityofpacifica.org for any updates. And just as a note, the regular meeting link is the same as this link for the study session that has started earlier this evening.
Thank you very much. All right, so the study session is to hear a presentation about the Civic Center campus facilities conceptual design. And the council members will receive a presentation regarding the updates to the Civic Center campus facilities preliminary conceptual design and provide direction to the city manager on the preferred scope of work for the Civic Center conceptual design. We'll begin with Deputy Director and City Engineer, Mr. Sam Bautista.
Good evening, Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, and City Council members. Sam Bautista, your Deputy Director of Public Works. At the January 11th study session, Council provided staff and Group 4 direction on the Civic Center conceptual design. In tonight's presentation, Group 4 will briefly review the schedule and go over follow-up council items, such as the rail car location, the Salada lot parking structure, and modular building construction. They will also present a base option for the project, along with 4 add alternates for your review and discussion. At the end of the presentation, we are asking City Council to provide input and direction to the City Manager on a preferred scope of work for the final conceptual design. With that brief introduction, Group 4 will present all the work they have done in the past 1.5 months. Tonight we have Ben Irinaga and Don Merkus of Group 4 to give the presentation. Go ahead, Ben.
All right. Thank you, Sam. Actually, I'm going to start off and Ben's going to jump in on the second part. So Sarah, I think we can probably go past our first slide. And this is what the mayor just recommended. What we're looking for is input analysis on the alternatives that we've provided and giving us direction on the preferred scope of work so that we can refine that for our final conceptual design. Next slide. As we look at the work plan and the schedule, which is on our next slide, you'll see that our first task, which is our surveys and reports, are pretty much wrapped up. I think we've had a little bit of delay on the geotechnical report. I think they're scheduled to get out there and complete the site work. I believe it's next week, and then that'll be followed up with our geotechnical report. We've completed our conceptual alternatives, and we're looking at getting input tonight on those conceptual alternatives so that we can come back with the preferred conceptual design in April. On the next slide, it'll summarize the project participation that we've done to date. If you recall, we did a lot of department head interviews in December. We're planning for a staff open house to get input on the preferred conceptual design in early March. For community engagement, we conducted the Neighbors Focus Group meeting on January 4th. We had our City Council study session on January 11th, which was immediately then followed up with meeting with the Pacifica Historical Society. We have completed FAQ for the project and made that available to the community. We're meeting with you tonight to get your input and direction on the conceptual alternatives. Planning on coming back to you in April. I think we're scheduled right now for April 26th for the preferred conceptual design. In the next slide, I'll summarize some of the items that we heard from you in January 11th that you would like us to follow up on and report back to you with. That was the rail car location, as well as the Salada lot parking structure, and then talking and doing some more research on modular construction versus renovation of existing facilities. And so I'm going to summarize those. And then for the Civic Center options that are in progress, Ben's going to present those. So why don't we go to the next slide, and I can summarize 3 options for council in regards to the rail car that the Pacifica Historical Society is renovating and has been discussed being located on the Civic Center or the Salada lot. There's 3 options that have been talked about either in the past or currently for location of the rail car on the site. The first one is locating it, which we have as option 1, behind the little brown church. And the second one is locating it over at the Salada lot along Francisco. And then the third one is locating it on Salada Avenue, kind of as a bulb out running parallel to the little brown church. As you can see by the parking summary, there's not a lot of difference between option 1 and option 2 because we're basically switching the rail car for 3 to 4 parking spaces. In order to put the rail car there, we need to displace some parking spaces. And so the parking that we're able to provide with those 2 options, option 1 is 55 spaces, with 24 being on the Civic Center lot and 31 being on the Salada lot. Option 2 has 30 spaces on the Civic Center lot and 22 to 24 spaces on the Salada lot. Option 3 is where we have the maximum parking, and we're actually able to have 30 spaces on Civic Center lot and 31 spaces on the Salada lot. Basically taking the rail car and moving it and bulbing out the sidewalk and the space adjacent to the little brown church, so we're not displacing any parking spaces. We have listed the pros and cons for each. I would like to note that we actually don't need an action on this item right now. Where things get located in terms of the rail car on the site is not one of the critical path items, and it can be something that can be decided later on, and perhaps even after the Pacifica Historical Society has completed the renovation of the rail car. It potentially get put off that long. It's not a critical path item, but as we're looking at option 1, the pros is that it's the lowest cost one right now because the Salada lot is left unimproved, and the Salada lot improvements then are deferred to a later date. As we're looking at the cons, is that the rail car is kind of hidden behind the little brown church and does not really become very prominent. It is as you look at the Salada lot, there's kind of a gap then with the parking there because there's no structure or anything along Francisco. And so there's kind of a gap in terms of urban planning. There's not a nice consistency or rhythm. As we're looking at option 2, there is a nice edge along Francisco, so that's a pro. The rail car is featured in the Salada lot also as a pro, kind of as its own opportunity to become kind of a destination or an element that is used to create the landscaping for the Salada lot. There's more parking at Civic Center because the rail car is located on the Salada lot. The immediate need is at the Civic Center, and so the parking is more convenient. We believe this is one the Pacifica Historical Society supports in terms of the options, these three options. Once the Pacifica Historical Society renovates that rail car, though, the renovation of this lot potentially is going to be more expensive just because of the amenities and the things that you might want to include in that lot to supplement the rail car. As we're looking at option 3, we're able to get as a pro the highest number of parking spaces. The rail car is featured on a prominent edge of the site, and the Salada lot cost is deferred because that can happen at a future date. The cons are the Salada lot is left unimproved. There is a gap along the street edge, as I mentioned, along Francisco Boulevard, and then there's loss of street parking along Salada. And so those are for your information. Any feedback is welcome, but again, it's not an action item. As we move to the next slide, the other question that we were asked to look at was, can the Salada lot support a parking structure? We're showing you a diagram here of a proposed parking structure that could fit on the Salada lot. And you can see by the bullets that we've lined out here that we can get 19 to 22 spaces per floor, which is about 515 square feet per space. This is not a very efficient parking lot. And what that means is it's more expensive. A good kind of rule of thumb for an efficient layout for a parking structure is from 325 to 350 square feet per space. The cost for the spaces, and this is, just kind of rough order of magnitude cost, is 50 to 55,000 per space. And that would be for an efficient parking structure, and be a bit more for a structure that is inefficient as this one. And that is really kind of determined by the size of the lot. If we're able to do 2 double rows of parking with park on a ramp, that's one of the more efficient parking layouts. And here we actually have to use speed ramps in between the floor levels to get the cars up and to the different parking levels. We can answer any more questions on that if you have it after we're done with the presentations. The next question from council is on the next slide, and that was the cost for modulars. There's a whole range of modulars. They definitely have progressed from what we recall as what was called modulars 20 to 30 years ago, kind of the old school modulars on school campuses. The cost for modulars for ownership can range anywhere from $140 to $325 a square foot. We're assuming as we're developing these costs that we're replacing both the City Hall and the P&P building on the Civic Center site. And so that's about 10,800 square feet of need. And so that range in the cost is 1.5 to 3.5 costs for just the modulars. We then, of course, have to do the site development costs to support them with the sewer connections, electrical connections, as well as water connections. And we're estimating that cost around $330,000 to $440,000 for the site improvement cost. And then we'll also have to provide parking. And so that would require the demolition of the P&P building and the old police department building on the Civic Center. And that's another $500,000 to $600,000. We are recommending that the lowest cost option is probably not appropriate for a civic center. And so then increasing, using the medium to high range in those construction costs, as well as using escalation that we're using in our construction costs for the regular construction at 4%. And so then that range for the modular cost is from 3.4 to 4.8 million. And then looking also at project contingency included in there and FF&E, just so that we're comparing apples to apples between this and conventional renovation. Then we have a project total cost of 5.1 million to 6.3 million. And again, happy to answer any more questions on that after the presentation. And the next slide. The pros, lower upfront cost for the modular, less disruption for neighbors because it can be a shorter construction schedule. And that is because it has a quick implementation. The cons are that it's less durable construction, typically estimating about 20 years for the life expectancy of a modular building. No public space or landscaping is given because the square footage of the modulars is almost exact size of the Salada lot. So there's really not a lot of room to do any landscaping or any outdoor spaces around the buildings. And it does not meet the parking requirement at the Civic Center site. So the parking, we would have to look for a variance for that. Next slide. So in summary, the cost for the modular buildings themselves is $230 to $365 a square foot compared to the renovation cost of $500 a square foot. Typical life of the buildings for modulars, 20 to 30 years. Typical life after the buildings are renovated to be of new quality is 50 years. And then the capital cost per year, you can see the range of 8.66 to 18.25 square feet compared to the $10 a square foot. One of the things that you need to really consider, because again, first cost is not your largest cost, it's your ongoing maintenance and operation costs for facilities, and it will be higher with the modular buildings than it will be with a renovated regular construction type building. Another note that we've put here on the bottom of this slide is that currently staff is looking at iBank for financing, and they do not finance modular buildings. And so with that, I think I'm ready to hand it over to Ben for the next slides.
Great, thank you, Dawn, and good evening, Mayor Beckmeyer, members of council. So in addition to the items that Dawn just discussed, the other part of the January 11th study session was reviewing different initial site ideas and what we're calling site alternatives with council. These are all options that were developed with the collaboration of city staff and some initial outreach and work at the previous phase of work, the feasibility study that was completed last year. And so what we heard at the last meeting generally was demolish the police building as a firm direction for all future considerations. And then continue to work with staff on looking at really cost and funding as a primary driver for the alternatives, as well as really creating nice people spaces and enhancing the civic quality and the workplace environment for city staff. So if you can go to the next slide, please, Sarah. What we've done since that January 11th study session is, again, further collaboration with city staff, some of the technical consultants, our own technical consultants as well, and also meeting with key city stakeholders throughout, including the Historical Society and other members of the community. But I think most significantly, back to the cost, is putting some real numbers to a lot of the ideas and options that we talked about previously. And so what we'd like to do here is start with just a quick summary of the updates to the site alternatives and some of the formatting of how we're presenting this. We'll go through each of these different, what we're calling the base option alternates, and then we can talk about cost at the end and go through that efficiently. And so where we've really started with this, building off of the direction set in the feasibility study back in the end of last year, is starting with this minimalist based option. And that is really the four fundamentals of the project of City Hall, the Police Department building, the PMP building, or the Parks, Beach and Recreation and Planning building, which we call PMP for short. That's a mouthful otherwise. And then the site improvements around in between the buildings. And so this minimalist option starting with City Hall is really a targeted and very surgical improvement to the building. That's really interior finishes, trying to mitigate any existing waterproofing issues, and providing some new restrooms, and just sprucing up the building, but not a lot of money set aside there for substantial improvements, especially on the exterior. True for all options considered per the direction at the last study session, the old police department building is considered demolished. For the P&P building, this is really where the bulk of the project is going to be focused, and that's a full renovation both on the interior and the exterior of the building. To put it in summary, that really means the building is going to look entirely new, even though it will be the same footprint as the existing building. So it will be unrecognizable and a substantial improvement for the Civic Center. And then for the site work, just to stay within that minimalist option and the funding that was allocated or directed by City Hall previously, which a project cost of about $6.7 million. The site work here is really focused to improve the spaces between the City Hall and the P&P building, creating a kind of more civic plaza, and then the parking area between the Little Brown Church and the P&P building, creating accessible parking, electric vehicle parking, and then a nice place that could be used for events. And so the remainder of the site would then be left as existing, the footprint of the demolished PD building planted for interim use and as a placeholder until further improvements can be done. But just really trying to be focused and targeted where the money's really needed functionally and to make the biggest difference at the initial go here. So beyond the base option, and you can see that's the column here highlighted in gray on the left side, we then have 4 different what we're calling add alternates. And really what that means is it's a menu approach to further improvements and enhancements that can be done to the Civic Center. And so each of these alternates generally focuses on one of the buildings. They should be thought about as options that you can, only do the minimalist option. You could do add alternate 1 and add alternate 3, but not number 2. And so they're not building or compounding on each other. You don't need to do 1, 2, and 3 to do add alternate 4. So they're each kind of their own individual scope of work. And we'll get into the nuances of each in a second here. But the one caveat to that is add alternate 4 is a combination of its own improvements and the work of add alternate 3. So that one's a little bit unique, and we'll dive into that a little bit more when we get into the detail here. So next slide, please, Sarah. Okay, so again, a little bit bigger picture here. The base option again is really the brunt of the work is the P&P building, demoing down the exterior to the studs, taking off the roof and replacing the roof, a full new exterior enclosure to really make it a contemporary and modern performing building, as well as visually just much improved from its current kind of 1950s commercial architecture, and then a full new interior layout, fully functional for the staff that would be inside, new finishes, fully accessible, the full gamut of essentially almost a new building. Really maintaining that existing concrete foundation and the perimeter walls around the building. Again, a very surgical approach to improving City Hall. We've got new finishes, improved restrooms, and then anything really necessary to stop the bleeding on the exterior. Prevent any water intrusion as best as we can, any window door repairs that really need to happen, just to make sure that the investment in the finishes isn't going to be negated by continued water damage 2-3 years down the road. Again, the police department building is demolished, and then that site work, again, is, as you can see, where that red line kind of jogs its way from the north side to the east side of the site, delineates on the right side the improvements between the buildings versus some of the existing site work on the west side of the site. So that's, again, the base option. And then, Sarah, if you can go to the next slide. So add alternate 1 is purely focused on the City Hall. And so this is some additional work and funds to really allow the interior layout of City Hall to be significantly modified to match perfectly what we've worked over the last couple months with city staff to be the current and about 10 to 15 year projected needs of the city for staffing growth. And so where the base option really is very surgical in those improvements. You know, we're adding restrooms. There may be a few walls here and there that need to move just functionally or for any kind of necessary accessibility. This would really be a full reconfiguration of the interior space. So not only just fresh coats of paint, new carpet, new flooring, but walls moving around, kind of a whole new layout than what you see currently. Next slide, please, Sarah. Conversely to that, at alternate 2 is really focused on the exterior of City Hall. And so as part of this project, and as we reported previously and have been working with the Pacifica Historical Society, the City Hall building is designated historic by City Council. And so it is a locally historic building. One of the recommendations that the historical architect that we worked with to analyze the building, you know, make sure we fully understand what we can and cannot do to the building from a historical standpoint, both from the local level as well as from the state of California's historical places requirements and federal historical places requirements. His recommendation after studying the photos and the history of the building, and especially looking at this photo here that's on the screen, is if possible and if budget allows, that the building should be rehabilitated to its previous appearance. And that's really, the building really saw some significant exterior changes in the late 50s. You can see in this photo, there's wood siding. The windows are very different than what you see today. There's a lot more architectural ornament along the roof eaves and especially at the entryway. And so it's a goal historically to make this look like the original schoolhouse constructed back in the early 20th century. And so this ad alternate would budget for that. And one of the real benefits of that improvement is it's not only an aesthetic improvement back to the historical past of the building, but also performance-wise, you know, we'd be taking everything off that exterior, allowed to really improve the building envelope performance, both from an energy perspective as well as just a deterioration. And you know, that building's lived a long life. The current design, the current exterior skin has endured a lot, and Pacifica is a harsh environment, and it's in need of a refresh. So this would allow that to happen and allow us to put the modern materials underneath the beautiful facade to make it perform well. The other part of this alternate, also on the exterior, is on the tertiary facade, which is the south side of the City Hall. So the part you can't see in this photo that faces the existing parking lot, is really trying to make this building fully accessible, which I think is a goal of all city staff, and in previous conversations with City Council and in the previous phase of the project, something that is strongly desired. And so that would actually be adding a separated elevator and stair core that's all meets ADA standards to get the public and get city staff up to the second floor of City Hall, which is currently not possible if you're unable to walk upstairs. And so that is something all included in this alternate. And again, just to be clear, the interior items of alternate 1 are not included in alternate 2. So when we get to cost, that's an important caveat to keep in mind. Next slide, please, Sarah. Okay, shifting the focus away from City Hall now, we look at the site. So as noted in the base option, the site work was really focused on improving those spaces between the City Hall, the P&P building, and the Little Brown Church, with the current parking lot in the southwest corner of the lot and the west side of the City Hall really left as existing. You know, you've got perfectly functional parking. The grading is fine. And so it could be left as is. But this alternate improves all of that, adapts the parking lot layout and the flow of the vehicle circulation to really work much better with the PD building gone. So it takes advantage of that building demolition. It also adds very necessary stormwater improvement. As we redo this much paving, we start to trigger certain regulatory requirements for how we treat all the water that accumulates on the site before it gets discharged into the city's water management system. And then we will consider also moving around the generator shed and the generator location. We know that there's concerns from the neighbors, especially the property owners directly adjacent about that. So that opportunity is a little bit of a finer grain detail and something that we would continue to study in later phases of work. And the next slide, please, Sarah. And lastly here is add alternate 4, and this really is an exercise in looking at what if we expanded square footage on the site. So all the options before, the base option and alternates 1 through 3, all are improvements on the existing usable area at the site, not including the old PD building. And so this is the first option where we actually look at adding usable square footage. And so based on working with the city and looking at what would happen if we were to add square footage, who would come to the site, what would the space be used for, and that whole discussion is going to be something that we return to council with in the April meeting in terms of potentially bringing engineering to the site, or Parks, Beach, and Recreation moving to the community center holistically. That's an ongoing discussion, but looking at the opportunity here, we're thinking about a 1,800 square foot expansion on the PNP building, which we're thinking is probably on the south side, makes the most sense, encroaching a little bit closer to the Little Brown Church, would meet most of the program requirements that we're looking at. This could also potentially be a new building, although that cost is significantly higher, but we have done that budgeting, but we don't think economically that's quite feasible relative to the other costs we're talking about here, but something we can definitely discuss if council would like to. And so with that expansion, the alternate also does include redoing the entire site work. As you can see, the parking here is shown different, taking advantage of the removal of the PD building. The reason that that's part of this alternate is because as we expand the PNP building into the what's currently the drive aisle off Francisco into the parking lot, we lose the accessible parking that's in the previous options was shown on the north side of the Little Brown Church and also is currently there. To just best practice, that accessible parking always wants to be on site. And so with that, we do need to improve the rest of the site to make sure that the parking is still accommodated here. So that's why there's a little bit of a double up between add alternate 3 and 4 in terms of the site work. Okay, next slide please, Sarah. So in summary, here's that same table that we started with again. So again, the minimalist base option on the left, and then the 4 alternates cascading to the right. For ease of reading, you can see the items that are bolded in the alternates. So in add alternate 1, under the City Hall row, we've got the full interior innovation. Alternate 2, we've got the finish upgrades, restrooms, exterior rehabilitation, accessibility. Alternate 3, we've got the full site improvement, and add alternate 4 is the expansion plus the site improvements. Those are the things that are changing. Otherwise, the scope of work remains the same as the base option shown on the left side. And then at the bottom, we have the overall costs. And so important to note, these are project costs, not construction costs. So these are all in, and we'll embellish what that really means in the next slide. But you can see that minimalist base option is still right around that 6.7, we're about $6.8 million. The current estimate, and we'll talk about why that is in a second. And then all these alternates, you can see the added overall cost at the bottom of each column there. And so each alternate, you need to add that amount to the $6.842 million. So for example, if you were to do the add alternate 4 only, you would add this 2.582 million to the 6.842 million. If you want to do the full City Hall, both interior and exterior, so alternates 1 and 2, in addition to the base option, you'd have to add all 3 of those numbers together. So the 6.42, the 1.317, and the $1.269 million. So I just want to make sure it's clear how this has to be read. Next slide, please, Sarah. And so just as we talk about project costs, because this is something that's very easily confused when architects especially, or any kind of budgeting is discussed when it comes to construction projects. There's the cost to build something and the physical construction of it, and then there's the cost all in of designing it, of all the city costs that have to go into coordinating it and permitting it, the furniture that goes in, things that the contractor never really bids. So when you open the bids on after a design is done and a contractor is ready to start construction, that number is just a part of the overall cost of any of these types of projects. And so first and foremost, as mentioned before, there's been about $175,000 increase in the project budget from the feasibility study. Included in that $6.84 million is the same FF&E costs that were previously budgeted, which is getting about $600,000. We've got carrying about a 10% contingency on all the construction costs and the FF&E costs. Just, things change, issues come up. We're working on existing buildings that are very, very old with not a lot of information on what lies beneath all the interior and exterior finishes. So it's really important to make sure that you're covered as issues come up in construction. We've got about 26% in soft costs, which is a pretty safe average, but something that we will continue to look at and may be able to refine and push down further. And then contingency on top of that, obviously, as cost change and scope changes, that the cost to do that work and design that work does change as well. So carrying that contingency is important. And so the reason for that $175,000 increase, the biggest things are, there's four of them. The demolition of the old police department building does have some costs. You unfortunately can't just drive a bulldozer through it and call it a day. There's a little bit of nuance that goes into it. There's a decent amount of regrading to make sure that even the spaces in the minimalist option are accessible. There's very fine requirements for what is an accessible grade in the building code, and so that requires a little bit of improvement from what's there now, and cutting and fill of the soil on the site. The buildings do require some pretty significant electrical improvements from a site utility perspective. The existing master service is quite small and won't support the new uses of the building and the renovation, so that has to be fully upgraded, which does cost some money. And then we did make sure we've got accurate escalation based on all the current projections and the estimated schedule that we'll talk about in a second, which does add about 4.25% to the cost of construction. And so that's just budgeting best practices and assuming the worst in terms of the economy growing. And we've already seen a lot of costs increase due to COVID, despite some other costs decreasing. And so a lot of materials, especially lumber, which is something that would be heavily used in this scale of construction, have been going up substantially. So important to factor that into the cost estimates. And then next slide, please, Sarah. And so important to note on that escalation, that all assumes a certain schedule. We have to kind of pick something out. And so the schedule that's assumed to date is that there'd be a design phase. So as Don mentioned, at the end of April, we're looking to finish up the conceptual design and would like to start into, whether it's with Group 4 or another architecture firm, since that work has not been awarded, anticipating getting into full design and construction documents close to the end of the year, 2021, and then having plan check with the cities folks and all other authorities having jurisdiction completed by the end of the year. And that would allow the city to go out to bid for the work in early 2022, hopefully having that done in about a year from today, and then construction starting after that date. And assuming about a 12-month duration right now, hopefully that can be a little bit quicker, but it really depends on the amount of work that's included. So those alternates will make an impact on the construction schedule. And so obviously if all these dates start to slide and get further and further out, or funding isn't found right away and this gets kicked a couple years on the road, that just those numbers will continue to escalate and change. So that's why this is important to understand. Next slide, please, Sarah. And that concludes this part of the presentation. So again, really tonight looking for some direction on the site alternates that we presented, input on the different alternates, the base option, the scope of work that should be considered for that final conceptual design. And next slide, please. I think there's maybe one more. There's some next steps, just getting ready for that end of April meeting, but I think good time for discussion. Thank you.
Mayor Beckmeyer, you're on mute.
Thank you. Usually that's Mayor Pro Tem's commentary. She's getting ready to make her comments, that's why. So I just wanted to say that we have time for council questions, and I'm trying to look at the public attendee list to see about public comment as well, because we have about 20 minutes until the council meeting starts. So I'll open it up to council for questions and clarification on the presentation. I'm not seeing any at this point. Sue, were you
Tiger and I
working?
both have our hands up.
Oh, I couldn't even see Tiger's hand.
Oh, okay. I have a couple questions.
Go ahead.
We did get a comment from the neighbor about the box with the generator, and where would we move the generator?
It's a good question, Sue, and something that we are continuing to look at. One of the reasons we haven't talked about that or didn't look at that too much in this phase, although we did put some different costs to various relocation or replacement options, is it is just a kind of a finer grain detail
Okay.
to the bigger picture things we're looking at now. We definitely understand the concerns with having that right on the property line, and knowing that they do have to do very frequent testing to make sure it's functional, that's required by code. That is very much a nuisance. So once we have a little bit more direction in the final scope of work, and what is going to happen where, and we know the funding available, there's definitely various opportunities we can look at to relocate that, or at the very least improve its enclosure and how it emits its exhaust.
And also, if we added 1,800 square feet, what is going to go in there? What staff will be in that building with an additional 1,800 square feet?
I think we'll defer that one to staff. I don't know if Kevin wants to answer that one.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Pro Tem, council members. To Councilmember Vaterlas's question, if we did expand it, then we would anticipate having enough room for Parks, Beaches, and Recreation Administration, as well as Public Works Administration and Engineering, to be located in that facility. I think there's some other options instead of maybe a larger meeting room in that facility, but maybe Ben or Don could speak to that. But that's definitely not the actual contents of that is not a decision that needs to be made right now. I think more of the driver on all these add alternates is just the affordability factor.
Okay.
Okay. Councilmember Big Stick.
So I took a liking to the number 2 add-on option because I like the historical society thing. But then when I was, $1.3 million is nothing to sneeze at. And as I was thinking about, whether or not cost is affordable, they had talked a bit about energy performance. And so it's a 50-year lifespan projected for the building. I was wondering if there's any estimate what the energy performance savings might look like when factoring in whether or not it's worth it to add that add-on from a fiscal viewpoint.
Okay, thanks. Other questions? I don't see hands, so really wave to me if I'm looking, but I don't see any. Okay. Shall we go to public comment? I see one hand so far.
Coffee when you're ready with the timer. I'll call our first public comment, which is Christine Bowles. Please state your name for the record.
Hi, this is Christine Bowles. I'm an architect also. I had a couple of questions for Benjamin. Can you confirm the usable square footage of the existing buildings? I know you're giving a cost per square foot, but I don't know the square footage of City Hall and the square footage of the PNP building. And then secondly, I know in the City Hall building, the main entrance stair really cuts up the space and therefore limits how that building can be used. Is that something that's historic that you need to maintain, or is that something that is part of your scope of a more major redesign of the interior of that building? And then thirdly, just having reviewed these plans the last time too, and knowing how much remodel work costs and the unknowns of it versus new construction, about whether an option might be considered where the PNP building is rebuilt to a taller height, since the City Council is now approving buildings 4 or 5 stories tall in that area. I know you lose space for stairs and elevators. And then maybe the historic City Hall could perhaps go to a low-income housing developer or someone else who would then restore that building, instead of the city having to incur costs for remodeling both of those buildings that still might not be that usable and functional for them. We could have more outdoor space on a roof deck, for example, and really have a modern state-of-the-art building in that option. Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll next hear from Sue Degree. Please state your name for the record.
Good evening. Sue Degree, I hope council takes into account the positive revenue that could come in as we highlight and capture our history. Because when people travel, we're already a destination city. When people travel, they do like to do the nature thing, the recreation, but also the history. So somehow, I don't know how you compute that, but I know there are studies for recreation and history about how that contributes to the revenue of a city. And when we have such great assets, if we could just enable them, that would be really nice. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mayor Beckmeyer, we have one more public speaker with username last 4 digits 2216. Please state your name for the record.
Hello?
Yes,
Hello.
we can hear you.
Oh, great. Okay, my question is about the mega church. Was this approved?
The topic tonight, right now at this part of the meeting, is about the Civic Center, proposed changes for Civic Center for city offices. So we're not having a discussion about that at this time. The regular council meeting will start at 7 o'clock.
Is that going to be including the mega church issue?
You would be allowed and invited to make public comment during that meeting on any item not on the agenda, and there is no item regarding a church on the agenda tonight.
So that means that I can't ask any questions regarding that because it's not on the agenda. Is that correct?
That means you can make a public comment about that topic because it is not on the agenda at the top of the meeting.
But I can still ask a question?
You can make a comment, you can ask a question, but the council will not engage with you on answering that question.
All right. So is this following this meeting?
Comment for you to make a comment.
Okay, is this right after this meeting on
Yes.
the Zoom?
Yes, and the same Zoom link.
So if I just stay on, it'll come on again.
I believe so. That's a city clerk. It might go dark and then come back on.
This is City Clerk Sarah Coffey. You can remain on this meeting, and it will continue on into the regular City Council meeting.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm. Are there any other public comments on this topic? Oh, I think I saw one. Assistant City Clerk, do you see any other hands?
I don't see any other hands at this time.
All right, then I'm going to close public comment and bring it back to council. So what staff is asking for from us this evening is a general indication and any, guided by any questions or concerns that we might have. So I'd like to open discussion, please, among council for thoughts on these ideas and feedback for staff. Councilmember Big Stick.
I was thinking it might be helpful to begin just by addressing one or all of Ms. Bull's questions about the current square footage, the entrance, and I don't know how I feel about following up on the taller height idea, but I don't, if it was considered at all. Maybe you could comment on that briefly, and then I have a follow-up comment about option 2.
Do you want to go ahead on answering those questions, Ben and Dawn?
Sure.
I'm looking at time. We have about 8 minutes.
Yeah, I can answer question number 1. I don't have the exact usable square footage for each building. They're, as you know, they're very nuanced, but the gross square footage for both is about the same at 5,800 square feet. So we'd have to get back to you on that actual square footage.
And in regards to the question about the interior stair that bifurcates the space, that is not a, the main stair going up is character defining. If we can look at restoring it, that would be looked on advantageously. The 2 side stairs that do go down is something that the historical report said that could be considered to be consolidated and improved to become accessible. So definitely functionality of that space can be improved with renovation.
And with regard to the concept of studying a tall, brand new other building and really.
Yeah, we have done studies for that, Mayor. If you recall, when we were looking at combining different elements in this site in the early feasibility study, it really comes down to cost. It really comes down to money. And so in council's direction from that feasibility study was to look at the $6.7 million minimalist option, which is what we were moving ahead with in our analysis.
Because at the time that we looked at that back in February, it would be cost prohibitive to start with new construction.
And add more additional construction by going up to 2 stories. It's just more costly.
Thank you. Council, other questions? I want to make sure everyone has a chance if they have questions. Councilmember O'Neill, Mayor Pro Tem.
Well, I noticed that you talked about financing for the module systems, but you didn't really talk about financing for the other options. And I know we're not going into the details or anything about, but I'm wondering why you would mention it for one and not the other.
Kevin, are you coming on to take that one?
Yeah, sure. Just to mention that we've spent a good deal of time talking with iBank about loans from the state and that they won't finance modular construction. So that doesn't mean that the financing strategy that's chosen and makes the most sense is going to be iBank. But we thought it worth mentioning that that's perhaps one of the leading ways of getting a low interest loan. So we thought important to mention.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Vaterlos, any other questions or comments?
No, I just, the hard thing for me is the sticker shock and the total amounts of doing this, because I'm used to seeing residential and not civic building and it's a lot different.
Yeah.
So I know I've talked to the city manager about it and been trying to work this out in my head, but I do realize it's very expensive. So that's it.
Councilmember O'Neill?
Tiger actually said he had a follow-up question for number 2.
Yeah, I just saw your light go on around your box, so I just wanted to make sure you had a chance to.
Okay. No, basically, I'm looking at it as the cost for the total, the cost for the renovation as well as for modulars are roughly the same. I think, we've been talking about making Sharp Park a, downtown Pacifica, whatever. And this is a chance for the city to actually show that we want to make an investment in Sharp Park, and a chance for us to actually improve the overall parking situation, which the staff report says Sharp Park has a shortage. So, I mean, we are payment shoppers, let's face it. When someone wants to buy a house, when someone wants to buy a car, the first question is, how much is the payment? Okay, and that's what we are right now. And I just think without knowing the full financial structure and options for financing, it's pretty hard for us to make a decision, other than I think we all probably agree the minimalist option needs to be done. Okay. But I think we all want to do more than that. Okay. But without knowing what the payment is, it's hard for us to make that. But I think, we need to look at, this is the city statement on, is Sharp Park, West Sharp Park, a definitive part of the city that we want to make a historical interest? Do we want to make it a shopping district? Are we willing to put our money there to invest in that neighborhood? And if we can improve, by putting modular, maybe we move PVNR down to the community center, and, engineering stays where they're at, and then we can put a public plaza in the Salada lot. But then, and you also heard part of the contingency of that budget, if we remodel the existing stuff, is, well, we don't know what happens when we get into these buildings that are 100 years old. Okay, so all of a sudden we go in there and maybe, it's total new foundation or whatever. And I think it's easier for us to deal with certainties as a payment shopper than maybes. And I think I really want to emphasize, this is not like a standalone project. This is the Sharp Park neighborhood, the city's commitment to make that a neighborhood downtown shopping. Okay. So I really want to know the financing, etc., before we make any real commitments on the add-ons and the minimalist and everything else.
Understood. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and I want to thank you, Councilmember O'Neill, for saying that, because I think that's what I was getting at. That's really hard for me to try to understand what we're really looking at if we don't have the numbers. But if we were to look at anything, I would want to look at add alternate 2, just because I think that the City Hall building needs renovation.
And add alternate 2 is the one that makes it fully ADA accessible. Yes. Okay. Thank you. Councilmember Big Stick, quick, what have you got?
Yeah, same deal with number 2. And I really am interested if we have a better idea of how much energy savings there is by going with that option, because if that offsets cost at all, then if we're saving money or offsetting the cost, that's a boon. And I think the historical draw, as to a degree said, that brings people in to spend money. That also is a boon, and the ADA compliance is a huge plus.
I know you didn't ask us to give definitive answers tonight, but I will say, just in regard to the early information presented about the rail car, the idea of having an active space in that continuation along Francisco Boulevard there, I think is important in terms of the overall look of how this project ends up. And then the ADA compliance piece about making the City Hall building fully ADA compliant is it's a deal breaker, really, for me. I just can't imagine not doing that. That's, and the last thing I wanted to add is I feel like the stormwater treatment issue is also critical. I mean, I know that when we are working on plans for other buildings and construction in town, that's a priority item. And it seems to me we have to make it a priority item when we're doing our own building too, if I understand exactly what it is you're proposing there. So that's my feedback.
And Mayor Beckmeyer, we are supposed to provide direction, yeah, on the preferred scope of work.
Yeah, that was the goal. And yet with the position, you know, the statements about not having the finance information, it makes it pretty hard to do that unless we can take something off the table. I'm not really sure what else to do.
Yeah, so just on that, one of the subheading to the recommendation was at this point in conceptual design to keep the add alternates 1 through 3, I believe, on the table, understanding that, you know, they're all just related to how much the debt service would be on this, and that we need to consider that in context of other budget priorities for the city. So at this point, if the council is willing, we'll just move forward with, you know, the base plus add alternates 1 through 3, continuing through the conceptual design.
Are you agreeable to that? Thumbs up? Yes. Okay. Thank you. So then we will move on to our regular agenda. Is that right, City Clerk Coffey?
That's correct. We'll now begin the regular meeting, and Mayor Beckmeyer, you'd want to call the regular meeting to order.
Yes, at 7:03 p.m. we'll call the City Council meeting for February 22nd, 2021 to order. And could we please have a roll call?
Councilmember Big Stick.
Present.
Councilmember Vaterlos.
Here.
Councilmember O'Neill.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Beer.
Here.
Mayor Beckmeyer.
Here.
And all council members are present.
Thank you. And we'll have a salute to the flag by Councilmember Vaterlos.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mayor Beckmeyer, would you like me to make a few comments about the meeting format tonight?
Yes, please.
This meeting is being held by video conference with no physical location open to the public. The public can observe and participate in this meeting via the Zoom link provided in the agenda or by phone to the dial-in number and the webinar ID provided in the agenda. The meeting can also be observed live on local TV channel 26 or online at www.cityofpacifica.org/livestream. For this meeting, live verbal public comments may be made through participation by Zoom. For members of the public participating by Zoom, use the raise hand feature to indicate that you wish to speak on an agenda item or during oral communications when the mayor calls upon that agenda item. For those participating by phone, use *9 or *9 to raise your hand to request to speak. The city clerk will call upon speakers at the appropriate time and unmute you to talk after calling you by screen name or the last 4 digits of your phone number if you're dialing in. Please clearly state your name, your full name for the record at the start of your public comment. Written and email public comments will not be read during the meeting, but will be made part of the written record and provided to council members. The format of this meeting may be altered or the meeting may be canceled if needed. You may check on the status of the meeting by visiting the city's website at www.cityofpacifica.org for any updates.
You're on mute, Mayor Beckmeyer.
See, I'm moving my papers around. I'm trying to keep it quiet so you don't hear all that rustling. Sorry. Thank you. So we have a special presentation tonight, HIP Housing Annual Calendar Jennifer Taylor Mendoza.
Mayor Beckmeyer, give me one moment while I promote Jennifer to a panelist. All right, we should have Ms. Taylor Mendoza coming up now.
Hello, Dr.
Okay.
Taylor, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you perfectly. Can you hear me?
Yes, you sound great.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So good evening, everyone. My name is Dr. Jennifer Taylor Mendoza, and I'm a board member for HIP Housing and also the Vice President of Instruction at Skyline College in the San Mateo County Community College District. On behalf of HIP Housing, I would like to thank the Honorable Mayor Sue Beckmeyer and the members of City Council Pacifica for your continued support of our organization. I live in Montera, so very familiar with the communities you serve. As a token of our appreciation and as a reminder of our partnership throughout the year, I'd like to present the council with HIP Housing's new 2021 calendar. And at this time, if you could display the calendar, that would be great. And you can just sort of scroll through as I do the presentation. Thank you. This is the 19th calendar HIP Housing has produced. It is filled with information on HIP Housing's affordable housing programs and showcases the artwork of children throughout San Mateo County. The children are asked to submit a drawing of a home along with a quote of what home means to them. 12 winners are selected to create this beautiful calendar, and this year, our cover winner couldn't be more appropriate. Look at the detail. You can see how Akshara has synthesized all that is going on in hers and our world. Melanie Liu was a second grader winner from Pacifica, and she's displayed in the October month. And here's her quote about home. I love my home because it has love from my family. It has lots of stuff that I need. I love my home because it has my family. It has food, drinks, and love. I love my home. Each year, we house over 1,400 people through our programs. Information about HIP Housing and home sharing program are in every city's housing element as a resource to provide affordable housing in the county. 81 residents from Pacifica contacted HIP Housing for affordable housing information. 60 residents and or employees in Pacifica applied to HIP Housing's home sharing program and received housing and community resource information. 8 people who live or work in Pacifica were matched. 28 residents were placed in home sharing arrangements, and 4 seniors and residents of Pacifica benefited from our Emergency Relief Fund. The Emergency Relief Funds helps with rent, utilities, and basic necessities during COVID-19. More than 700 persons reside in our properties that we own and are managed throughout San Mateo County. Please help us and continue to help us share the word about our programs, especially home sharing. For many, home sharing is an amazing opportunity to rent a room affordably. With the pandemic, more than ever, people are suffering and our programs can help. We hope you can display our calendars proudly and continue to refer people to our programs. We also hope this calendar will stand as an important reminder of how essential housing is, especially for everyone, including, and most importantly, our children. Thank you for this opportunity to share. That concludes my presentations, and let me know if you have any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I remember receiving the calendar earlier, a couple months ago, and noting the October placement, and it was very exciting. I contacted the school district and the principal of the school right away to let them know that that was there. It was really, really nice, but I always enjoy looking through that, and really the art from the children is so poignant.
Thank you. Thank you.
Other comments? Mayor Pro Tem?
Yeah, Dr. Taylorman, thank you for being here tonight. I really appreciate it. I feel really lucky that Chris Sturkin is a regular attendee at our Pacifica Collaborative meeting. And so we have this monthly connection with HIP Housing that's been really important because we've been able to share that information through the different sectors of our community through that relationship. And so I think that's just so important for all of us to remember that it's those relationships that create resources for our community. So thank you so much for being here tonight.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you.
Councilmember Big Stick? I can't hear you.
I say thank you very much. Thank you, Dr. Taylorman, for being here. And I want to echo everything that Mayor Pro Tem just said. And just it's so important that you're helping us to make those connections and bring people together and not merely helping folks to find a place to live, but connecting community at the same time that you're doing that. It's essential and it makes our community's heart beat. I have not seen this calendar prior to now. I'm new to council. Where do I get one of my own?
Yes, definitely. That's great. Well, hopefully we're going to be sending them out soon. They're definitely on the website. There's a link, but we can send them out to your house.
That would be wonderful. Let me know if I need to give you information or whatever you need. Thank you.
Absolutely. I will follow up.
Councilmember Vaterlas.
I think that the home sharing program is a win-win for both people. It helps elderly people get a few small chores done, maybe shopping, and it also helps the person living with the elderly person to get a room where they needed to be housed. And I just want to commend you on that. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure being on the board for 6 years.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you for being here.
Good evening.
Okay, and we will move to our consent calendar. Are there any items that council members wish to pull from the consent agenda? And if there are any persons wishing to address the council on any consent calendar items, you may do so at this time. Each speaker will be allotted 3 minutes. Items on the consent calendar will be adopted in one motion unless a council member or a person in the audience requests before the vote on the motion to have an item discussed. Time limit on comments is 3 minutes or less. And I'm checking. I see 2 hands are raised. This is for consent agenda items. Specifically, I see one of the hands raised is 2216, which was the hand raised at the last part of the meeting. So if this is on the consent agenda, these are items 1 through 6. That's what this piece of public comment is for. We will have another public comment period for anything not on the agenda in a few minutes. Assistant City Clerk.
Our first speaker is Christine Bowles. Please state your name for the record.
Hi, this is Christine Bowles again. I wanted to discuss item 4 on the consent calendar. And I was just there's no real supporting information in the staff report. And so I was going back this evening and trying to do a little research because this is the first I've heard of this project. So I found that the City Council had approved the design services contract with Moffitt and Nickel on September 22nd of last year. And then I saw a staff report from Public Works on November 9th of last year that talked about the financial impacts. There's a task 1 that's funded now and a task 2 for further design services that was not yet funded at that time. And that document also says that the public will be informed of major milestones as the project is designed. And I live in Manor District, so I think I've been paying attention since November, and I don't think I've seen anything presented to the public, so that's one question. And then secondly, this is a grant application and it says it's for construction, which makes no sense to me because the task 2 of final design has not been done. And there's no way between November and now that full construction drawings, would be done and approved. So I'm a little confused about what the grant application is actually for and would like to ask for some clarification. Thank you.
Okay, so we'll take that item off the agenda and have staff answer some of those questions. Is that the right protocol, City Clerk?
Yes, Mayor Beckmeyer, we can pull item number 4 for a separate discussion.
Very good, thank you. And then I see one other hand. I'm not sure that this is for the consent agenda. Assistant City Clerk?
Now call on user with the last 4 digits, 2216. You're unmuted.
Yes, I'm not sure if this is on your consent form because I don't have a copy of that. But earlier I had mentioned I wanted to make a comment regarding the mega church being built to the back of the valley.
Right.
I don't know.
That would come right after this portion of the meeting.
Okay, fine. So
You can just
I have
hang
to wait
on for the next public comment period, which will come after the consent calendar is approved and the item that we just pulled, and we already know item 4 is coming off and there may be others that are coming off. And as soon as we're done with that discussion and vote, then we'll have the regular public comment.
So how will I know this? Will you announce the public comments are available?
I will.
Thank you.
Thank you. Are there other public comments on the consent calendar? I don't see any. Bringing it back to council. Do any council members wish to pull any items or have any comment or quick question? I have one and I see that Council Member Big Stick has one. Go ahead, Council Member Big Stick.
Yeah, I had a quick question I actually wanted to ask Council Member Vaterlaus regarding number 6.
Item 6.
Hold on.
Okay, it's item 6, you have time. All right, we'll pull that. And I just had one quick thing. It's a small correction on the minutes. So I don't know, City Clerk, if you want that now or we pull that and then discuss it.
Madam Mayor, you do not need to pull for questions and you do not need to pull for clarifications. You can do that before the vote on the consent calendar. So if there's just a question on a consent item or if there's just minutes that need clarification, that can be done without pulling the particular item.
Okay, so that answered, thank you, City Attorney. That answers my question for my thing. Councilmember Big Stick, is yours a quick one or do we need to pull it?
Yeah, I think it's a pretty quick one.
Okay, why don't you go ahead?
Okay. And Councilmember Vaterlaus, number 6 was regarding the letter about trying to help landlords out who might have to go into forbearance. And since this is not an area of expertise for me whatsoever, as I was reading through it, what occurred to me is it seems to address the issue on the state level, but not necessarily the federal level. And I just wanted a second opinion if you thought it goes far enough as written, or if we should put something in a little bit more federally.
Well, they've actually already passed that. They passed it about 2 weeks ago. It does allow for landlords to accept 20% off the rent, 20% forgiveness of what is owed, and then the state is going to pay the difference. The forms are not even out yet, and there seems to be a little bit of discrepancy because the tenant has supposed to have paid 25% of what they owe in order for the process to work. So it's a little confusing right now, and I am going to take something that explains it a little bit more, because I do have someone in that situation right now. So I'll get back to you and tell you some more details. I've read some question and answers, but they don't answer my questions. So,
That comports with my understanding of SB 91. I was just, I didn't realize that that has the direct bearing on the forbearance question, and that's
I'm
what
sorry.
I say. So what you're saying is SB 91 has addresses the forbearance question enough that you're satisfied with this?
Well, the 20% issue.
Okay.
It's not exactly a forbearance, and forbearance is a whole nother subject, because if you put off your payments on your mortgage, which is forbearance, and certain lenders will add them on to the end. But the problem with forbearance, and sorry, I shouldn't get into too many details, but the problem with forbearance is that you're now not paying your loan as agreed. So it looks like a foreclosure for your credit. So that's a problem with going into forbearance.
I think offline we should have a deeper
Yeah,
dive on this.
I'll have
and you
a
should teach me
conversation
a little
with
bit
you.
more. But thank
Okay,
you.
Thank you.
Okay, my quick one is on packet page 14. No, sorry, packet page 34. And it's in the comments about the Beach Boulevard Infrastructure Resiliency Project discussion from the last meeting. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. The 8th line down, it's something that I was saying, and the way it's quoted isn't exactly what I said, or certainly not what I meant to say. So I just wanted to correct the record. And this was in regard to the statement that says, with the sentence that says, she added that it is also felt on the coast, as we know, this is sea level rise, and why we are doing the Beach Boulevard Infrastructure Resiliency Project. The next phrase should be, which is often referred to as the seawall meeting. So striking the words, she stated that we move forward, and replacing with which is often referred to as the seawall meeting. That was my one correction. And so I think we can go forward with a motion for all items except item 4.
I move to approve the consent agenda minus item 4.
I'll second.
So consent items minus item 4, moved by Beer, seconded by Vaterlaus, and I'll call the roll call vote for those. Councilmember Big Stick.
Before I vote, do we need to add the correction to the minutes in the
The vote can just say as amended with regard to the minutes, and that's enough.
so I vote yes with the amendment to the minutes.
Councilmember Vaterlaus.
Yes.
Councilmember O'Neill.
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Beer.
Yes.
Mayor Beckmeyer.
Yes.
Okay, and we'll move on to the consent calendar minus item 4 with item number 2 as amended, passes with a vote of 5-0. And we'll move on to item number 4.
So with regard to item 4, city manager, would this be something you would address, or do you want to hear from Public Works staff?
Yeah, I believe Ryan Marquez, engineer from Public Works staff, can speak in more detail to that. I'll just emphasize that, with all of our infrastructure resiliency projects along the coast, we are constantly pursuing grant sources from wherever we can. And this is a great opportunity to help buy down the share that the city would need to contribute to this project. Take it away, Ryan.
And this is Lisa Peterson. I am the Director of Public Works. And I just wanted to jump in really quick before Ryan gives a quick overview of this project and this agenda item, just to answer with the other question that came up regarding public outreach And, similar to other maintenance projects like our street maintenance project, what we typically do is we notify design items through the posted agenda. And it's when it comes to construction is when we do the big public outreach. And because this is really a maintenance issue and a maintenance project, that's how this project is moving forward. And with that, I will pass it off to Ryan. Thanks.
Thanks. Good evening, Honorable Mayor and City Council members. My name is Ryan Marquez, Associate Engineer with Department of Public Works. The item before you this evening is for approval of a grant application to the California State Boating and Waterways Shoreline Erosion Grant Program for the 400 Esplanade Infrastructure Preservation Project. The 400 Esplanade Infrastructure Preservation Project is located just to the west of the Manor Post Office at near the intersection of Manor and Esplanade. The project was born out of bluff erosion that occurred in 2017. And at that point, the city's geotechnical consultant advised to protect the bluff from further erosion as the road and infrastructure within the road was at risk of failure. At that point, city staff formulated a two-phase plan. The first was an emergency revetment installation, which occurred in 2018. And the second was a longer-term permanent, fully permitted resolution to this issue in the area. And that is currently underway. The scope of the work right now with Moffett and Nickel that was approved in late 2020 is to do technical studies and then to essentially come up with a preferred alternative to take through full design and permitting. So we don't know what that is yet. However, city staff has been able to get funding through the HMGP program, and we are looking ahead at getting construction funding. As you can see from the staff report, this grant program, the funding is actually not available until middle of next year at the earliest. So staff is anticipating this future cost and trying to get possible funding for whatever preferred alternative comes out. We're using our best cost estimate at this time. So that's all I have for that item, but I'm happy to answer any questions that are that you guys have.
Council members, questions, comments? No? Thank you.
Thank you, Ryan.
Thank you very much, Ryan, for that explanation. Councilmember Big Stick.
I'll move that we accept number 4 on consent.
Second.
City Clerk?
Item number 4 was moved to approve by Councilmember Big Stick, seconded by Vaterlaus. I'll now call the roll call vote. Councilmember Big Stick.
Yes.
Councilmember Vaterlaus.
Yes.
Councilmember O'Neill.
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Beer.
Yes.
Mayor Beckmeyer.
Yes.
And item number 4 passes unanimously 5-0.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. All right, that brings us to the conclusion of the consent calendar, which brings us to oral communications. This portion of the agenda is available for the public to address the City Council on any issue that is not on the agenda. Any person wishing to address the council shall be recognized by the mayor during oral communications, provided, however, that during the oral communications portion of the agenda, only items not on the agenda for that meeting may be addressed. All remarks shall be addressed to the council as a body and not to any member thereof. Council members shall not enter into debate with speakers under oral communication. A maximum time of 3 minutes will be allowed for any speaker pursuant to Pacifica Municipal Code Title II, Chapter 1, Section 2-1.118. Any person making impertinent, slanderous, or profane remarks, or who becomes boisterous while addressing the council shall be called to order by the presiding officer. and if such conduct continues, may, at the discretion of the presiding officer, be ordered barred from further audience before the council during the meeting. All right. Public comment. Let us open public comment.
Mayor Beckmeyer, Elizabeth Brooks, Deputy City Clerk. Our first speaker is Christine Bowles. Pardon me, our first speaker is now Chris Redfield, who will be followed by Gloria Stofan. Please state your name for the record.
Good evening, staff, council, Chris Redfield. I'm curious of the appropriation of $595,000 from the street fund for slurry seal on Terra Nova from Fassler to Oddstaff. The PG&E gas line replacement project, while much needed, has seriously degraded Terra Nova and Oddstaff roads between Aspen and Park Pacifica, respectfully. If notice of completion is to be issued post-project, how are we left with primitive surfaces? Generally a contractor, PG&E being the general. How is it the neighborhood is left with this apparent city cost? Public clarification must be forthcoming along with proper surface restoration. Next item is lot number, address number 1055 Terra Nova Boulevard, parcel number 023-593-070. Did the owners of Park Mall apply for a permit to operate a mud bog at that location? Since this is no longer a construction staging area, it has reverted back to that. The property owners in the city, by lack of enforcement, have opened the city up to citation and/or fines by several agencies regarding contaminants entering the storm drains and the watershed. This lot flows mud and water illegally, not only to the ecosystem, but to the parking lots and the patrons of those businesses, ultimately supporting Park Mall owners. The owners must obviously be forced to address this to prevent future potential fines to the city. Thank you.
Thank you.
We go now to Gloria Stofan, followed by Suzanne Moore. Gloria, please state your name for the record.
Good evening, City Council members and city staff. My name's Gloria Stofan and a member of Pacifica Housing for All and Faith in Action Bay Area. On March 5th and 6th, the city will be doing their goal setting sessions. I want to ask that each of you as council members think about our housing crisis, especially during this pandemic, and consider how important affordable housing needs to be addressed, especially for those low-income individuals, seniors, those that are disabled, and for our workforce, especially our teachers. Also consider what is affordable these days, and how can Pacifica come to terms in dealing with such issues. Funding always seems to be the big issue. Therefore, the city needs to continue to reach out to those who are capable of helping us with grants, etc. After all, I consider shelter as a human right. Before I leave, I and several others are concerned for our Pacifica renters. If any renters listening in on this city council meeting and are really struggling to pay rent and their landlord is threatening to evict them if they don't, they can go to faithinactionba.org for more information on tenant rights, and to know that eviction moratorium has been expanded to June 30th. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we'll hear from Suzanne Moore, followed by call-in user with numbers ending 2216. Please state your name for the record.
Good evening, Suzanne Moore of the Manor District. I appreciate remarks made by Dr. Jennifer Taylor Mendoza of the importance of home. As we approach 500,000 COVID deaths, the pandemic is a perfect storm of isolation, economic stress, especially for families, and reduced communication. Many do not have access to previously trusted institutions like healthcare providers, schools, and churches. The economic downturn, loss of wages, and increased debt has caused stress. Families are in need of childcare. Times are tough for many Pacificans. The digital divide has created an inequity in access to schoolrooms, healthcare, legal services, and governmental participation like I have this moment. We have a responsibility and duty to help those in our community who are struggling and fearful. Here's what we can do. 1, be aware, be open. Use of fear to manipulate is likely occurring in many settings, and we need to be alert. 2, reach out, especially to those who are isolated. I challenge this city to reach out to our residents most at risk, people of color, elders, disabled, and those of lower income. They need clear pathways to both communication and resources. 3, donate to agencies who are supplying services, but nonprofits can't do it by themselves. 4, contact our legislators, the city, county, state, and national leaders. Demand an equitable COVID recovery dependent on identification of those most impacted. Our unhoused deserve a pathway to safe, affordable housing. Other communities have worked with the county to create safe parking and transitional housing as stepping stones to permanent housing. Pacifica needs leadership to make this happen. Fear has been interjected and has created a barrier to a critical community need in this pandemic. This council has an opportunity and duty to help Pacificans in need. Let's do our part for a future in which we can all be free of fear. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we'll hear from call-in user 2216, who will be followed by Anita Reese. Please state your name for the record.
My name is Cindy Harris. I live in Park Pacifica. I have a few questions regarding the mega church. Have you considered the safety issues of building this church? And my second question is, if the permits have not been permitted, how can they move their pews onto the property and ask for dump trucks and bring their equipment in if nothing has been approved yet? If that one spark, all it takes to cause a fire back here. We have one road in and one road out. If there are multiple people in this church, it's going to be such a conjunction. It's going to be terrible. We will not be able to get out. That's my other concern. But also, did you research who these people are? Have you looked at who this church represents? I think that you need to reevaluate who these people really are and what they are bringing to the community. Are they contributing to Pacifica? Are they helping Pacifica in any way? Or are they adding more pressure, more trash, more homelessness, other things that we don't need here? Those are my concerns. And also, the kids play on the streets here, and they drive so much traffic going back and forth and back and forth. All we need is for one child to be killed. I mean, I'm trying to avoid that. I don't think that our infrastructures can handle all the traffic of this mega church. We just had our streets repaved. I don't understand why we were not notified. Only 500 spaces between, I guess, square feet from the church are notified. What about the rest of the community? Don't they have a say? I live in this area. I don't want strangers coming in. I don't want more crime coming. You know, this is ridiculous. Have you researched everything? Those are my questions that I have to ask. And also the fire codes of all the people who are going to be there. Is it viable? Are the buildings big enough? Are they going to be able to sustain them? It's so dry back here. One spark from their equipment will just take down the entire hill. Not only that, but the towers that are up top of the hill will be cut off from communication whatsoever from everyone. So I hope you take this into consideration before permitting any of this to be done. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anita Reese, you're our next speaker, and you'll be followed by Christine Bowles. Please state your name for the record.
Anita Reese with the Pacifica Resource Center. I want to thank the city and the community again for your ongoing support while we continue to respond to the ongoing pandemic and its impact on Pacifica residents. Our office continues to be open to the public on Monday and Tuesday mornings, Wednesday and Thursday afternoons, and Fridays 9 to 1. During all other times during our regular office hours, we are available by phone. If you or someone you know needs groceries, please contact PRC to sign up for an appointment to pick up groceries at our grocery drive-through on Wednesdays at the parking lot at the American Legion Hall, which is at 555 Buell. Otherwise, please go to the drive-through after 3:30 and we'll serve you as quickly as we can. We can be reached by phone at 650-738-7470, by email at info@pacresourcecenter.org, or on our website at pacresourcecenter.org. PRC continues to help folks who are unable to pay their rent or mortgage. If any renter or homeowner needs help paying up to 3 months of rent or mortgage, please contact us by phone, email, or our website. I also wanted to mention that the new federal and state funded emergency rental assistance program is expected to go live sometime in March. It's going to be administered by an organization called LISC, which is Local Initiative Support Corporation. For folks who apply for this funding, they can get up to a year's worth of rent paid if property owners are willing to take 80% of what is owed from April 2020 through March 2021. The program is still being finalized, and I'll share more information as I learn more, especially when the funding becomes available. Folks interested in applying for this funding can also check LISC's website at lisc.org. I imagine they're going to be doing a statewide education campaign about how folks can apply for these funds. They can do it on their own, or they can come to PRC and we can help people apply for those resources. If you or someone you know needs help filing or preparing your taxes, please contact us by phone or email at taxes@pacresourcecenter.org. We're scheduling appointments to drop off materials, and we'll be going over returns over the phone before e-filing. In addition to this work, we are continuing our Unhoused on the Coast outreach work. Please continue to contact our UC outreach staff by email at ucoutreach@pacresourcecenter.org, or by calling outreach specialist Daniel Gardner at 650-575-4861, or Marlon Morales at 650-387-4458 if you know or see someone who's living on the streets, in an encampment, or in a vehicle. If you know anybody who needs any of this help or anything I haven't mentioned, please have them call us at 650-738-7470. Thank you.
Thank you.
Christine Bowles, you're our next speaker, and you'll be followed by Cindy Abbott. Christine, please state your name for the record.
Hi, did I unmute myself? Yeah, okay. Thank you. This is Christine Bowles again. As a point of order, I believe that there should have been time for public comment after the item 4 presentation by Public Works. My comment is not about the item technically, but really about the public review process. So I'm going to keep going here. So Lisa Peterson said that public notification and input would be given before construction started. I believe that's completely inappropriate. The document, page 2 from Public Works, says, let me just find it here, is noted in the HMGP application, the feasibility and design of the project will provide public information on major milestones. Design decisions are major milestones. To completely take the public out of that, I believe is wrong. The consultant's been directed to provide design options, including armoring and sand nourishment. Neighbors are concerned about environmental impacts, public access to this beach in our neighborhood, and potential impacts the projects can have on the fragile cliffs and public paths in the area, as well as the adjacent apartment buildings, the bluffs. I don't understand why Sharp Park is allowed a full process with public input for basically the same kind of work, replacing a structure. And here in Manor, we are shafted and don't get any notification or input at all. I believe this is completely inappropriate, and I would request the council to change the direction that you're given to Public Works in this matter. Thank you.
Thank you.
Cindy Abbott, you're our next speaker. You'll be followed by Sherry Stoddard. Please state your name for the record.
Good evening. I'm Cindy Abbott, and I'm wearing my hat as the Executive Director of Sanchez Art Center. I'd like to invite the public, staff, and City Council to visit our 3 new exhibitions. In the main gallery, we're showing the abstract landscape paintings of Laura Corello Titus with a focus on the impact of climate change, along with the vibrant contemporary tapestries of Dance Doyle. In the West Gallery, members of the Art Guild of Pacifica are presenting a group show titled Perspectives. And in the East Gallery, I'd like to particularly invite the community at large to visit the Sea Change exhibition that draws on collective community experience about sea level rise. The show is a marker in an ongoing social practice engagement project that recognizes that the arts have a unique ability to bring us together and that artists can serve as agents of change. Funded by the San Mateo County Office of Sustainability through a community resilience grant, the project is focused on providing the community space for reflection and fear-free conversation about sea level rise. Early in 2020, a series of community engagement events had been planned that necessarily had to be canceled due to the pandemic. Smaller groups have been engaged in person and via Zoom to continue a facilitated process named the Bureau of Linguistical Reality that creates neologisms or new words to help describe community feelings, concerns, our relationship to the ocean, and our hope that we can come together in a positive way to plan for our shared future. The exhibition includes photographs, paintings, and sculpture by local artists about sea level rise, and some of the neologisms that have been created through the Sea Change project here in Pacifica. The galleries, located at 1220 Lindemar Boulevard, are open to the public Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, 1 to 5 p.m., providing a space viewing experience that includes booking free appointments via our online platform, sanchezartcenter.10to8.com, and limiting the numbers of visitors at a time to well below our capacity. We look forward to having you in for our artistic enjoyment and to consider our shared future. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sherry Stoddard, you're our next speaker. Please state your name for the record.
We're not
Sherry
hearing-
Stoddard, you're our next speaker.
Oh, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, we can hear you now.
I'm sorry. I keep tapping on my phone. Thank you. I'm sorry.
No
My
problem.
name's Sherry Stoddard. Thank you for listening to me and thank you for taking a moment. I just would like to say I feel like the city is not being kept in the loop because Cape Breton back there at 650 Cape Breton Drive with the mega church is isolated. It's in the furthest back of the valley. And unless you drive back there, you're not going to know what's going on. And many people amongst us walk around that neighborhood. And even though they've put a fence up, that's a bar gated fence, so we can't walk up in the trails anymore, we can still take pictures and see what they're doing. They've requested dumpsters from the city of Pacifica. My mom had to throw away a toilet, and that's the only way she knew through gossip. So, I mean, they're moving forward, is what my point is. They brought pews in today. They're turning the church stables into housing for people. And how many people they plan on moving in there, I'm not certain. But with 20 cars there right now, and with I believe they've said something like a proposal of 150 to 200 people in the corral. They plan on putting a tent there and flip chairs to hold their ceremonies. I'm all for churches. I was baptized at the Presbyterian Church on Terra Nova Boulevard, St. Peter's down there in Odstead. There's plenty of room around these churches where they don't affect other people, and they certainly don't affect the wildlife right around there. There are mountain lions I've taken pictures of. That's right there. Bobcats right there. All the noise and the lights and the 150 chairs. Imagine how many cars are going to go into that parking lot. Imagine. So my mom backing out of her hill of a driveway, because you know the hills in Pacifica, it's a hill and she has to back out of her driveway. If she hits a car, it's going to be her fault because the traffic going and coming, she's not going to be able to see. And it bothers me because she's knocking on almost 80. And There are people that have lived there. Gosh, the Schultzes down the street have been there 45 years. My girlfriend across the street's been there over 30. I just feel that this is falling on deaf ears. I've written emails and I don't get responses. I wrote one recently to Gannon and Neblin and Murdoch and Lazarus and nothing. And I took pictures. I'm showing proof of different aspects that I feel like it's, like I said, is falling on deaf ears. And I feel like the city's been bought. They spent 50 grand donating to the Boys and Girls Club on Frontierland. They spent laptops and 10,000 going to Terra Nova. They've spent money going to the police stations and fire departments. I feel like the city's been bought, and I'm out of time. But thank you for listening to me.
Thank you.
Mayor Beckmeyer, our next speaker is with a username who's already spoken. With your permission, I'll check to see if it's a different speaker though.
I see the name Chris Redfield, and Chris Redfield has had public comment already. Is there someone else at the Chris Redfield address that's seeking to make public comment?
Evidently not. Am I good?
I can hear you now.
Okay, good. Just different item. I just want to thank the president.
Hold on a sec. No. There's one public comment period. And your time to speak is to cover whatever items you wish to cover. And so your time was spent, I think, on 2 different items prior. Thank you. Assistant City Clerk, do we have other public comment this evening?
I don't see any other hands at this time.
All right, thank you. Then I will bring it back to council communications. Who would like to start? Councilmember Big Stick.
Thank you, Mayor. Hi, everybody. My most exciting news of the week, and I hope I'm not spoiling this for anybody else, but I was allowed to get my first vaccination shot. Specifically, the website myturn.ca.gov. That's myturn.ca.gov. In Oakland, apparently they're already allowing teachers and essential workers and anyone else, by essential workers, food and agriculture is my industry, anybody else who falls under the 1B category to make their appointment and get vaccinated at the Oakland site, big site, but it ran smooth as silk. And it was really as enjoyable an experience as having a small shard of metal thrust into your arm was. So myturn.ca.gov, if you fall under the 1B category, look up what it is first, and then go to the website. It'll take you to another county if that's what needs doing. As I'm trying to create this tradition of talking about the food I'm eating around town to make sure everyone knows of the local establishments where you can eat. In honor of the Chinese New Year, I ate both at Kenny's and Jufu. Kenny's has the beef yum yum soup, which is awesome, and Jufu has a wonderful lamb selection. But mostly I kind of focused on breakers this week. I had a few different omelets and a crab cake Benedict, but the omelet I had was the Roadhouse chili omelet. Was delicious. And I took my omelet down to the sea, and there were these dolphins that greeted me as I was eating. So go to Breakers, grab a bite, and see if any of our seafaring friends want to wave hello to you. I attended the Emergency Preparedness Commission meeting on the 17th. That was last Wednesday. The bulk of what I gleaned from that meeting came from Captain Clement's report. They're working on the local hazard mitigation plan, and that I think he said was going to go on for about a year, but that process is starting up. So you'll probably hear more about that if you have feedback you want to give. They tested the permanent generator down at the Tom Lantos tunnel when they shut down the tunnel on the 2nd of February. And apparently that test was a success. So we have power there in case of emergency. Captain Clements met with the North County Fire Authority regarding rolling out the Safe Haven program. We're talking a lot about fire safety. I've been talking a lot about fire safety, and I'm sure we will be more and more as time goes on. Specifically, they were talking about how to make people more aware of their own evacuation zones. And so as time goes on, we're going to hear more about Safe Haven, how it works and what it means for making our community safer. And I believe he also met with PG&E regarding the smaller area shutoffs during fire season. So we'll hear more about that later too. Half of Pacifica police was vaccinated, which is great news. Yay, vaccinations, myturn.ca.gov. And on March 22nd, we're having Tsunami Preparedness Week. So stay tuned for Tsunami Preparedness Week, the week of March 22nd. My next Peninsula Clean Energy meeting is on the 25th. That's going to be Thursday. Feel free to join in if you'd like. I attended the City Democrats meeting last Saturday where our mayor and city manager gave a State of the City presentation. Good things on the horizon. And I wanted to close out by just briefly saying some community members reached out to me about the possibility of going to a physical location and hearing concerns from the community about Cape Breton. And I just wanted to say, I checked in with city attorney, and especially when it comes to land use issues, if that does come before council, we really have to go a little above and beyond to be impartial when that comes before us. But what I want to say to all of you, because we've already heard a couple people speak tonight, and I know it's a big issue, send your emails. Show up to these meetings. You're already doing it. Keep doing it. We listen, we hear you, and more than that, city staff hears you. I appreciate the comment that you don't feel like you're being heard. As a planning commissioner, as an ex-planning commissioner, as somebody who has been a planning commissioner, I'll tell you, a lot of the reason why these meetings keep being postponed is because city staff does listen. And a part of that equation is that when they receive your feedback, they're investigating some of it, and that pushes it down the road. But when you're not being heard and it's being put off, I appreciate that when you're not getting any messaging, you don't know what to think. A part of what you could be thinking, though, as somebody who has the experience being there, because you're being heard, those meetings are being pushed a little bit because staff is working harder to do more research to try to address those community concerns. And I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you. Who's next? Councilmember Vaterlas.
Okay, we had our ad hoc committee meeting for COVID questions with council, which will be this Friday at 1 p.m. It's going to be Facebook Live. You do not need Facebook to come on, and you can ask questions. This initial meeting that we're going to have will be just Mary and myself talking and answering questions. In the future, there will be guest speakers, but not this time. You can, for vaccine information, you can also go to COVID Vax, VAX, at smcgov.org. I listened to conversations with Kevin Mullen, and that was about small business. And I learned that San Mateo County is the most aging county, and we have put, 130,000 vaccines into 175,000 vaccines into arms. So we are moving quite rapidly. I'll quickly say I went to SFO and had mine done there, and they were extremely efficient. Our numbers for COVID are going way down. As far as hospitalizations, we have lots and lots of hospital beds. There's a number that they go by, and it has to be below 1, and we're at 0.69. So we're doing great. And at the county meeting, which I also attended, the county manager said that he thought that we would probably, if we could keep it the same, and we're going perfectly right now, we could maybe move right into the orange level. So just keep your fingers crossed for that. I went to the DEMS meeting too, where Sue Beckmeyer and Kevin Woodhouse spoke. Today I attended the flood sea level rise, and it was only about the Bayfront Canal, so it didn't affect Pacifica. The City and County Association of Governments legislative meeting, mainly what we talk about are the bills. And so we went over a lot of the bills that are coming out, ones that haven't been approved yet. And we did not endorse any of the bills right now. We're just waiting. At the regular City and County Association of Governments, we had a presentation on sustainable streets, their master plan, which would have something to do with our city hall, because it has to do with the drainage, and also the bike and pedestrian master plan. And that's it.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem.
Good evening, everybody. It's good to be here tonight. So I'll piggyback on Councilmember Varlas's update about COVID conversations with council, COVID questions with council. Don't worry, I'm going to get the title right pretty soon. I'm really looking forward to it, like for the opportunity for us to have other ways to engage with our community and to be more visible and to answer questions. And so, yeah, I'm really looking forward to that. It's this Friday at 1 o'clock. And then we'll be sharing the links to the videos after that. So if you can't make it on Friday, then you'll be able to hear the information later on. So I really appreciate that. I've went to a lot of different housing meetings. So the first one was the HOPE Interagency Council, Housing Our People Effectively. And that was on February 10th. It's a public meeting with the county. And we went over the emergency rental assistance funding that Anita just spoke about in her public comments. So thank you, Anita, for explaining it really well. I appreciate that. There's going to be money coming in to our county and to our core agencies. So people, if you need help, please ask. Just ask. Go to the resource center, see what they can do, because we all need help right now. Everybody does. So there is money available for that. We also got a report back about the hotel acquisition and program planning updates from the hotels that the county purchased, one in Redwood City and 2 on the coast side. They spoke about the one in Redwood City. It's 95 rooms. It has full kitchens and furniture, kitchen supplies and linens. It's move-in ready, as they say. And it'll be permanent housing for seniors with 30% below median income. So I'm really excited about that. The county's doing some wonderful work around housing. And then we had the homeless outreach service updates, which Anita also gave the update on Pacifica there. So thank you again, Anita and the Pacifica Resource Center, for all of your hard work. I got an update from Pacifica Housing for All. So I want to thank all the people from Pacifica Housing for All for reaching out to me and connecting with me and giving an update. It felt really good to reconnect with you. And one thing that they wanted me to talk about was that they had a meeting with Supervisor Horsley and Chris Hunter not too long ago. And basically what they discussed was that if Pacifica has a plan and a location, that the county will follow our lead. They were talking about the Patisserie Bakery. I guess that place is for sale, and if housing is possible there. They're hoping that Pacifica may be able to get a few rooms at the Coastside Inn in Half Moon Bay. So that would be wonderful if we could share the shelters on the coastside. That would be really great. And then I know there's more, and so I'll give regular updates about their meetings because they've reached out to me and asked me to do that. So thank you so much for that. Another housing related agency, or should I say meeting that I'm going to now with my work hat, but I still represent Pacifica, is with the Mental Health Service Act. The MHSA money is a millionaire tax for San Mateo County. And they've just added me to the Housing Initiative Task Force. So I'll be able to represent Pacifica there and learn about all the housing initiatives coming through that specific funding cycle. And then, last but not least, I attended the open space meeting. And again, the open space meeting, we talked a lot about Maury Point, about parking and garbage and congestion out there. So that topic's going to come up again and again. We'll be talking, I'm sure they're going to come to our goal setting to talk about it there too. We also talked about, hold on, let me just look over my notes. They're renaming the trail at the top of at Sweeney Ridge, at the top of Fassler. There's the parking lot, and then there's a little section of trail there. So you can rename we're going to rename the trail, and there's a link on our city website, and it went out in Connect Pacifica. So a survey's gone out, so people can participate in that. And then they're looking at the Preservation Award coming up here soon. It's an award that they give out every year. So we're looking forward to that. I think that's it. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Councilmember O'Neill, you're up.
I attended the San Mateo County Convention and Visitors Bureau. It was the sales and marketing, and what they were doing was sharing some data and points they have for putting an online presence, and also information in terms of the visitors and bureaus recovery here in San Mateo County. And it was interesting that for every job we have that's visitor related in San Mateo County, it's actually supporting 2 other jobs. So there's a whole, they've YouTubed or videoed, recorded the whole thing, and I will be sharing that information with your the Economic Development Committee meeting. Also attended commute.org, and I see that Deborah from Half Moon Bay was elected to that at the last CCAG meeting. So she and I are going to be talking to each other about trying to have more service on the coast, you know, for both of us, because now there's 2 coasties on there, okay, versus 1. Nice. I also attended the Pacifica Democrats meeting that Sue and Kevin spoke at. Also, I haven't had a chance to follow up on the links. However, in one of my packets, I just got a list of the links. If someone is interested in what the guests are and what the current state of mass transit is in the Bay Area, and what they're thinking might happen in the future, I have the list. And one of the things that they talked about was that 50% of workers right now are still going to work because they have to. So there's 50% that are basically, working from home. Their prediction is somewhere around 20 to 25% of the people that are presently working at home are going to be going back to the offices 2 to 3 times a week. And that a lot of the companies, when they did a survey for commute.org, that's what they were finding here, that a lot of the companies are going to try to have their workers come in 2 to 3 days a week. So that's going to be, again, traffic is nice now, but it's probably going to be changing. And pretty much everything seems to be consistent, that when schools open up in September, that's when the traffic is going to start again. So, because at that point, we will be having or approaching herd immunity. Summer's going to be over, school's in session, people may start traffic. So we're going to be looking at that. So anyhow, that's it.
Well, thank you very much.
One more thing I start my 4 days of the airport Zoom conference tomorrow.
Yes.
So that's going to be some interesting topics.
I look forward to hearing about that. That's the
UC Davis
UC Davis, yeah.
annual conference on some of the, I can't attend all of them simply because I can't sit in front of Zoom for 4 hours every day, and I do have to work. But I am going to be attending a couple select items.
Nice. And are you going to that too, Sue Vaterlos? I know you have so much time to go to that too, but I thought I heard that you were going to maybe attend or something.
I was not invited. Thank you.
Councilmember O'Neill will just have to fill us all in. No, it sounds like it'll be really interesting. I saw the listing of things, and Mike, you get a link right after the fact, so you can check out sessions at your leisure.
I think that is what's going to happen. However, I don't know. You know what I mean? I've never attended this one before, so I don't know. But my understanding is that's probably what will happen if they do what everybody else does.
Yeah, great.
And I will be happy to share that link with the council or staff. I don't know if it's a public link or not. So.
Well, thank you for doing that. It's a big time commitment, but I really appreciate it. Okay, well, let's see. My schedule, it was one of these, I didn't think I did a lot because it didn't feel like I did until I started looking at it and went, oh yeah, I went to that. Oh yeah, that happened. I think my overall balancing act was off a little because last week the schools were closed for students, and my job is one where when they're off, I'm off. So it didn't have that going on in addition to city council stuff. So it wasn't as busy, but it was busy enough. I attended the Economic Development Committee meeting. Councilmember O'Neill and I are liaisons for that. And we heard a really terrific presentation by one of the subcommittees about a promotional activity for town. And Mike, jump in and help me if I go off the explanation line a little bit. But it's a collaboration between EDC members and the Chamber of Commerce. And it's kind of like a bingo game where you, a resident, anybody, will be able to submit, you do a 5, across or down or whatever. And the items on the card are things like went to a Mexican restaurant or had coffee at a local coffee place or different things like that. Not super specific to the name of a business, but a type of business. And the idea is when you have made a bingo, you attach your receipts and submit it. And then there will be a drawing and there will be a gift card that will be eligible to be used at any Pacifica business. So it's not necessarily a restaurant or eatery, or beverage place, but it could be, a shop or something. So I think it's really exciting. It's modeled after work that's been done in Burlingame and San Mateo, I think. I can't remember. There were 2 or 3 other cities that have done similar programs. So more on that coming soon. It's very exciting and we're looking forward to it. That'll be neat. I attended several meetings last week. One of them was a federal briefing call about the CARES Act funds for many iterations of different CARES Act funding. Different groups are included, different goals are included. That's where we got the stimulus checks, for example, for people who received them directly. And usually when they start negotiating about this at the federal level, they include relief for cities and counties, and usually it's taken off the table. And luckily and thankfully, this point it's on the table, and it's working its way through committees, and it was with the House when I attended the meeting. I don't know where it is right now, if it's moved to the Senate yet or not. But it is it isn't going to help bring relief for the cities for things like lost revenue. As you know, we know there has been less tourism, the less TOT revenue coming, lower sales tax, although not as lower as we anticipated. We've had some increased costs because of the pandemic. We have lost revenue because we can't do programs, for example, in PBNR. These are all the kinds of eligible expenses that can be evidence for drawing down the amount that each city is allocated. And what was really, you know, driven home in this presentation, and it was really nice to hear, was that there is direct funding for cities. It's not based only on if you have a block grant, if you have you get block grant funding if you have a population of 50,000 or more, which we don't. And often any kind of funding like this goes through the state or goes through the county. And people on the call made commentary that, and sometimes it doesn't quite make it down to the little cities, or it doesn't make it down to the little cities perhaps in the way in which it's envisioned when the money is set aside at the federal level. In this case, they've absolutely set aside the money for each city. And there is a proposed amount. I'm hesitant to quote the dollars because it might not turn out that way, but it's several $1 million for Pacifica. And they cautioned us about that. You know, it is in negotiation, it is in committee. Anything could change. This isn't done. But the folks that were presenting were very confident in their presentations. And so more on that. We'll keep you posted on that. But it's hopeful. I'm hopeful about that source of relief for the city. I attended the Coastal Cities group meeting, which is part of, I have to train myself. I used to call it the League of California Cities, but now is known as Cal Cities. And this is a small group of folks that represent the 61 coastal cities in the state. And Kevin Woodhouse, our city manager, attends that with me. It was a very useful conversation. One of the most important elements that came out of it is the recognition that we need to work on definitions and agreeing on language with the Coastal Commission staff. It's on the work plan to address this, and that work plan has been approved by Cal Cities board. And one of the items is simply the definition of development and redevelopment. And what does that mean in terms of properties in the coastal zone? We know that we've struggled with that and had a lot of discussion about that as we prepared our own sea level rise adaptation strategies. And it was a little comforting to me to hear one of the folks in the meeting say that sometimes the Coastal Commission uses a very broad definition of development. And it can mean any change at all to a property. Includes, and our assistant city manager, Tina Wermeister, explained this to me, includes the use of that property. So when I think of development or redevelopment, I think of building something, and it's not necessarily building something. And so getting a good grip and a good handle on these definitions is high on the work plan. And the committee there's a subcommittee that's going to meet that I'm part of to further work on that. I'm sure that the city manager has more to add, but I felt like it was a productive meeting and that we're making good strides just in the couple meetings we've had so far. And I'll share more as those evolve. I attended the Pacifica Democrats meeting on Saturday, and that was where the presentation was given about the state of the city, focused on the planning projects that we've been working on and are currently in the middle of, and the state of where we are with those. It focused on capital projects that we have in the works and a budget update. That was largely the budget information that we had at our last council meeting, right? Was our last meeting, I think. So that was useful and beneficial, and there were no Zoom bombs, and that was a relief too. Although I felt bad for the chair. She had a lot of trouble with technology, and I know what that's like when you're trying to run the meeting and your computer's not working. So that's a challenge. Let's see. I think that's all I really wanted to report, and I'll give it over to staff communications.
Thank you, Mayor Beckmeyer, Mayor Pro Tem Beer, and council members Kevin Woodhouse, City Manager. Just a few comments. One is that I did want to reiterate that there's a new restaurant and brewery and winery grant program that launched. We mentioned it at last council meeting 2 weeks ago, but the application process opened today, and countywide, this is through the county and the Chan Zuckerberg Initiative and the Chamber and Samsida, and up to $10,000 grants for restaurants, breweries, and wineries. So I don't have the link off the top of my head, but I know the Samsida website has all of the information. And for everyone in the audience who's listening, please encourage your favorite establishments to be aware of this grant program, and if they qualify, to take advantage of it. Something caught my eye in a countywide coronavirus-related briefing last week as well, and it's really kind of one of the more quiet, great programs and victories, so to speak, countywide, and that's the Great Plates Delivered program. And there's just astounding statistics in the Great Plates Delivered program. So I just wanted to share that, particularly for the community, that in this program that delivers meals for qualified seniors, in Pacifica, the numbers are there are 234 eligible participants in it, and meals served are approximately 96,000 meals at a value of $2.1 million. And that program's continuing into March. I'm not sure if it's going to end in March, but it's really been another great thing that we've done countywide. And I know there's plenty of Pacificans that have benefited from that. So I just thought I'd mention that. I did want to mention, because there were a couple comments about Cape Breton, that city staff has notified all that have expressed interest in that project. We have kept them informed, sent out a notice about the continuation of the Planning Commission meeting. So I did want to make sure that we are communicating with all of those that have expressed interest on that. And then finally, another comment that was raised, it was regarding the PG&E work down on Terra Nova, I believe. And just to clarify that $595,000 was an administrative financial transaction in the mid-year budget. That's not for that project. That was for the slurry seal that happened last year. And we just needed to move the money into the right bucket to pay for that. The work that PG&E is doing, they will not have sign off on their final until they have slurry sealed the construction area.
And White Plains.
Yeah, and that has to occur in warmer weather. So just to reassure everyone that the city's not paying for what they're messing up. So,
thank you.
And I believe that completes my comments.
Thank you. All right.
Mayor Beckmeyer, can we have 5 minutes?
Oh, thank you. Yes. Let's take a 5-minute break. It is 8:25. We'll come back at 8:30. Thank you. actually item for tonight. And that is a potential, we're going to have a presentation from Chief Dan Steidel, a potential police department community engagement tools. The proposed action is for us to receive a report on various potential community engagement tools that are available to the Pacifica Police Department and to provide direction regarding city manager's recommendations relating to Community Police Academy, Police Chief Advisory Panel, and Police Commission. Chief Steidel.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor, council members, and community members. I'm Dan Steidel, your Chief of Police. Thank you for this opportunity to speak on some important issues tonight. Go ahead right into the next slide, please. So tonight, I want to discuss 3 different items with you, as Mayor Beckmeyer already stated. The Community Police Academy, Police Chief Advisory Panel, and Police Oversight Committees, which are also known as police commissions. If you recall back on August 25th, 2020, that was the last time I spoke to council regarding a similar topic. The topic of the night then was called Policing in Pacifica. And one of the things that happened that night is when I spoke regarding a Community Police Academy and a Police Chief Advisory Panel, what had happened was I think there was some of the topics got tangled up, and there was some question regarding a police chief, a Community Police Academy and a Police Oversight Committee. Perhaps that it was one or the other, they had something to do with each other. So what I hope to accomplish tonight for the council and the community is to separate each of these ideas and explain what they are and how they, whether we believe they're good or not good for Pacifica. So one of the things that I want council to understand is these 3 items, they are separate items. They serve different purposes. They do not overlap with each other, and they are not related to one another. So as you go over this, it's not like we have to select 1 or 2 or 3 or A, B, or C. It is simply 3 separate type of entities. So as we talk about this tonight, I want to remind council something that I've talked about, something in the past, and that is communication and trust within the community. So our first 2 meetings that we had, June 17th of last year and August 25th, and talking about policing in Pacifica, we talked about use of force issues. We talked about bias. We talked about how the Pacifica Police Department had altered its use of force policy to be in compliance with state law and best practices. We talked about bias, different types of biases, unconscious bias, conscious bias, racial bias. We talked about the police department increasing training in those areas. We talked about increasing training in de-escalation. And you might wonder, well, what do these things that we're talking about tonight have to do with those things? Well, they don't directly have anything to do, but they're part of the bigger picture. So one of the things that I've learned in my almost 32 years of experience, and I've spoken about on many occasions before council and at public meetings, is at the police department, we can't do our jobs effectively without the help and the trust of the community. And the only way to gain that trust is through our actions and through continued communication. We can change policies, we can increase officer training, we can do all of those things, but if we allow ourselves to become disconnected with the community, none of that's going to matter. We need that communication. So tonight, what I'm hoping to do is show that this helps complete that picture. Some of these ideas help complete that picture of communication. Next slide, please. So the first topic I wanted to talk about, this entity, it's called a Community Police Academy. These have been going on for decades. And back in the mid-90s, the Pacifica Police Department did a few of these, and they were a resounding success, and they were very well accepted and very well attended by the community. And what they are is they're usually a 7 to 8 week course that community members can sign up with, and you attend the whole thing, not just parts of it. And police officers, your line level police officers, teach the community and speak to them regarding different topics that might be important to them, things that we get questions about, things that affect their everyday lives, such as criminal law, domestic violence, mental health, crisis intervention, and the big one that all people always seem to want to know about is traffic enforcement. What we do to mitigate traffic issues within our community, how the community can help with that, etc. So we find that this is a very good engagement tool for both community and for the staff. It gives the community the opportunity to interact with police officers on a non-enforcement level and also on a non-call for service level. Because most of the time when people have to call the police for something, they're usually not having the best day. That's not where you get that real good, relaxed environment. This provides that environment. It allows the community to see that police officers are people too, and it allows them to have that interaction. We call that humanizing the badge, and it's very important in terms of allowing a community to be accepting of its police officers and understand that they're normal folks just like themselves. They just happen to wear a uniform and wear a badge. And again, transparency and communication. There's many things that can be brought up by community members that the police officers will talk about regarding these different topics and how we operate. We look at it as opening the doors or opening the hood of the police department and allowing the community to look at the engine and to understand why it is we do things the way we do, why we respond to domestic violence calls a certain way, why we deal with mental health certain situations a certain way, why we deal with traffic enforcement a certain way. One of the things that's come up in the past conversations regarding community police academies is that law enforcement uses them to indoctrinate people or to recruit people. There's no other way to put it other than that it's patently false. It's a false narrative. Again, we use these as a communication tool. There are many other communication tools we already use here at the police department that we don't use to recruit people from. For example, our CERT program. Our classes are always overflowing. Most times we have people on the waiting list for those because people come to them because they trust us, they want the communication with us, and they want to be part of something important. And the same is true for our earthquake preparedness courses, our surviving active shooter courses, and the list goes on. One of the big events that we had within the last couple of years, we couldn't do it last summer because of COVID, but we had an open house here at the police department, which we hadn't had in many, many years. And that open house over a 6 or 7 hour period drew over 400 people that came here, that talked to our officers, talked to our detectives, looked at our police dogs, saw our police motorcycle, and got to know us a little better. And the one question that we got from the majority of people that had to ask us questions is, why don't you do things like this with the community more often? We want more. The Community Police Academy is one of the ways that we would like to do that. Next slide, please. So the next topic is a Chiefs Advisory Panel. Now, we view this also as a community engagement tool. It's a panel that could be selected by the Chief of Police and the City Manager, selecting an individual from specific neighborhoods within the community, however we want to break that down. We know that Pacifica is broken down into several different neighborhoods that largely they're they're proud of their identification of a certain neighborhood, whether it be Lindemar or Fairmont. The idea is to get representatives from all of those areas of town that the Chief of Police and command staff that we could communicate. Again, the idea is to increase the communication between the neighborhoods, between the police department and panel members, a two-way communication. We would use a panel like this as a conduit of information that would flow up to the command staff and myself at the police department from different neighborhoods regarding issues they're having, or perhaps problems that need solved or things that they want the police department to address. Or if I have something that I need input from a different neighborhood about, I could bring that information down via that community member that was assigned to the Chiefs Advisory Panel to push information out. And what would normally happen in something like this is members would meet with the Chief of Police to discuss these issues, usually once a month, usually one evening a month. Next slide, please. I'll give you an example of one way a panel like this was used. In Menlo Park, when they went to their body-worn camera systems, the chief knew his community very well and knew that they were very sensitive to privacy issues and knew that officers wearing cameras on their shirts recording community members might raise some of these privacy concerns. So the chief reached out to his panel members and to get feedback of what are things that I should consider. I need to bring a policy back to city council about the use of our body-worn cameras. And I know the community is going to have something to say about the privacy issues. What do I need to know? What is of your concern? And along with input, from these community members on the chief's advisory panel, the chief was able to assist in authoring a policy that the city council ultimately approved. So what's important to understand about that is that panel would work the same way that we would want this panel to work. It's an advisory panel only, a non-Brown Act committee. They are not making decisions. They are not voting on anything. They are simply acting as a sounding board for the chief, and I am acting as a sounding board for them representing their different neighborhoods. Now, while this would be a non-Brown Act committee, we feel it's important to communicate the council and with the public as to what's going on. So we would, I would report yearly to the city council regarding the activities and the things we've talked about. What I would also expect to occur is when an issue comes up that I have to speak to council about, that involves something that I've talked to the chief's advisory panel about, that would be something that I would certainly include in my presentation or my staff report to let the council and the community know that what I'm bringing forward on any given night, I did get some input from the community, and this is what I had heard from the community already. Next slide, please. So the final one, this is the one that was getting confused with Community Police Academy. As you can see, it's something that's completely different. A police commission or committee is a Brown Act body. They may make police policy, make police department management decisions, conduct discipline investigations, may either issue or recommend discipline for misconduct. And they're usually associated with large police agencies that has a history of misconduct and criminal activity. And by criminal activity, I'm not talking about an incident of one officer who does something criminal and gets in trouble for it. I'm talking about a pattern of criminal activity, something on a corrupt scale or something that leads a city council to believe that we can't handle this on our own, and neither can the chief, the city manager. We need a separate governmental body in place to deal with this type of business. One of the things of note is these commission or committees are very costly to run due to the difficult navigation of complex personal issues. The legal fees tend to run high for these types of committees, and these are people on these committees are normal folks that don't have any special training in this. So there is a continual need, just like any other commission or committee, for legal aid from the city attorney's office. Next slide, please. So right now, looking over the past 5 or 6 years, the Pacifica Police Department, we average about 2 formal complaints against officers per year. These are usually for minor policy violations. Of note, the majority of the complaints are internally generated, meaning that either I've seen something of concern or one of my command staff members have, or more often than not, it's one of my sergeants, one of my line level supervisors. These are the people that are charged with supervising the officers on a daily basis. And if it appears that there's some sort of policy violation that may have occurred, then an internal affairs investigation is conducted to determine was there any violation, and if there was, what do we need to do? And this is where the culture of the Pacifica Police Department comes in, of holding our staff accountable. Our staff knows that if they do something they shouldn't do, if there's any level of misconduct, there's going to be discipline, and in some cases, retraining if that is necessary. One of the things that a police commission or committee does that should be noted, it takes the authority to run the department on many facets away from the chief, away from the city manager, and takes it away from the city council. Next slide, please. So in conclusion, looking at these 3 different entities that we've talked about, the city manager and myself, we do recommend reinstituting a community police academy at the Pacifica Police Department. Probably not till 2022, post-pandemic. It's something that it needs to be in a more, in a one-on-one basis with people present, not on Zoom. It doesn't have the same effect. The City Council can also advise if it desires the Chief of Police and the City Manager to establish a Police Chiefs Advisory Panel. And the City Manager and Chief of Police, for the reasons stated, do not recommend the establishment of a police commission or committee. Next slide, please. And finally, before council begins discussing this item again, I just want to reiterate one of the things that we've spoken about, again, at many of these meetings, is about the ability of the police department to communicate with the community. Some speakers in the past have been resistant to that. I've been very, very forward with you in my intent to do everything I can to increase communication with this community. And that's what some of these items we're talking about tonight are. And I thank you very much.
Thank you very much for that presentation. Shall we have, are there any clarifying questions, or shall we have public comment and then do our rounds? Do you think we'll do that first? Public comment? Yes? Oh, Councilmember Big Stick, you had a question?
A quick question before we go into public comment. Actually, two quick questions, if you'll humor me. Just, Chief, do you have an approximate idea how much it would cost to do the academy on the one hand? And the second question is just given the I don't know why I'm not missing. Sorry, I'm having trouble with words tonight. But the overheading idea of communication in general, Coffee with a Cop seemed like it was a pretty successful program. I'm wondering, just in alignment with the idea of communication, which is an overarching theme, there we go. Are there any such programs going on while COVID's going on? I understand how much more difficult it is, but are there any attempts during COVID? And then what's the price tag on the academy if you have one? Thank you.
Certainly. So Councilmember Big Stick, the first thing, the community academy, and this is conservative, probably in the high side, probably $6,000 to $7,000 per session, and we be per program, per the entire program, 7 to 8 weeks. I would envision doing this twice a year at most. So $6,000 to $7,000 every time we put it on. Those costs are borne out of overtime. As you know, as I've spoken about before, the department, our minimum staffing is also our maximum staffing. There's no extra personnel. So the majority of the teaching would likely be done on overtime. However, where we can flex schedules or make things work, we would to try to bring those costs down. But I'd say at the high end, $6,000 to $7,000. Regarding to your next question regarding, if I remember correctly, engagement with the community, Coffee with the Cop. Yeah, most of that's, not all of that's been put on hold right now. The only engagement we're really doing at this time is via Zoom. And as you know, you can only do so much with that. It's as soon as we can get back into a stage where it's safe to meet and we're all meeting again, we will be doing the Coffee with the Cop and those type of things again. We think those are very, very important. It's just with COVID, it's dramatically reduced what we're able to do right now.
Thank you.
Okay. Let's see if we have, I see that we have 4 hands raised so far. Assistant City Clerk, 06, 7.
Our first speaker is Julie Starobin, who will be followed by D. Gold. Please state your name for the record.
My name is Julie Starobin. I live in Pacific Manor, and I was surprised and appalled to read the staff report with the 3 so-called community engagement proposals. Not one of them reflects or addresses any of the concerns of the Pacificans who spoke at the June study session about policing. one of the very important issues that many people brought up was the issue of racial bias, that exists in the Pacifica Police Department. The city was urged to gather data to better monitor it, but nothing the police chief has suggested speaks to this at all. It is so very disrespectful to think that no attention was paid to the issues that were brought up at that study session. 3 other reiterated issues that have not been addressed by this staff report was creating a crisis intervention team that did not include armed police for calls that involved mental health crises. Another one was removing police officers from the schools and using the money saved to hire mental health counselors for students. And the third one was changing existing police department policies around the use of weapons, including banning the use of tasers and tear gas, rubber bullets. And even if there haven't been very many incidents of such weapons in Pacifica in recent years, banning them sends a powerful message to our community. I urge the council to revisit the suggestions that came from the community in June and vote down all 3 of these proposals before you today. Don't spend money on things that Pacifica doesn't need. Thank you.
Thank you.
Dee Gold, you're our next speaker. You'll be followed by Victoria Becker. You're unmuted. Please state your name for the record.
Hi, my name is Deej Gold, and I live in Pacific Manor. Tori, can you turn that down? And I'm also a member of Pacifica Social Justice. I participated in the 2 study sessions about policing in Pacifica, and yet was surprised to find this item on the agenda. In the 2 study sessions, we heard many concerns from community members, some of whom had been racially profiled by the Pacifica Police. We were reminded of the collaboration of the Pacifica and Daly City Police in the killing of Errol Chang, a community member who was suffering from a mental health crisis. At no point in the study sessions did I hear community members seeking a community police academy. I did not hear support for a chief's advisory council that in this way would meet outside of the public view, as would normally be required by the Open Meetings Act, nor for that matter did I hear people advocating a city council appointed oversight commission. I was somewhat amazed to read in the staff report that there were no significant problems that the police thought warranted, that there were no significant problems, and therefore the police didn't need oversight because there were only 2 formal complaints. But we all know that people do not go to the police to complain about the police because they feel endangered and because it results in nothing. We have all learned from the experience of our neighboring communities that unfortunately none of the oversight models actually changes how police treat houseless individuals, people of color, and don't change police behavior in general. And we all know the police do not feel comfortable complaining to the police about the police. In the study sessions, people talked about the need to change our reliance on police to, quote, control our communities. We need to deal with racism in Pacifica. If the police department really wants to move forward on this discussion, then let them provide the racial and other demographic data we have been repeatedly requesting about officer-initiated interactions, including traffic stops and including stopping of people who are perceived as houseless. Instead of this self-serving proposal by the police department, we need to discuss how we can move forward with functions such as response to mental health crises or providing more support to the young people of Pacifica, including safer schools, and move them into community-based models that de-escalate situations for the good of all involved. We are not the first city to try to figure this out, and we can look at all the models that are being created in Santa Clara County, Oakland, San Francisco, Los Angeles, Denver and Boulder, Colorado, and Eugene, Oregon, and which are being advocated by Daly City for Black Lives. Thank you.
Thank you.
Victoria Becker, you're our next speaker. You'll be followed by Carolyn Jaramillo. Victoria, you've been unmuted. Please state your name for the record.
We're not hearing you.
Sorry, I'll start over again. Sorry, I thought I was unmuted.
No worries. The clock's starting now.
Okay, my name is Victoria Becker. I'm a member of Pacifica Social Justice. I'm speaking tonight again in the memory of Errol Chang, who was killed by police 6 years ago when his family called for help during a mental health crisis. The proposals discussed tonight in item 7 do nothing to address the issues of systemic racism in the Pacifica Police Department. They do not address the many issues raised by speakers who talked about their experiences with racial profiling by the Pacifica Police during the 2 study sessions in June and August. Instead of increasing funding to the police for community policing schemes, it's time to start looking at ways to defund the police. Pacifica needs an independent crisis team staffed by mental health professionals to respond to mental health problems and unhoused people needing help. There are examples of this, as previous speakers have mentioned. People should look at the CAHOOTS program in Eugene, Oregon. It's time for this community to start looking at this sort of program. Thank you.
Thank you.
Carolyn, you're our next speaker, followed by Suzanne Moore. Please state your name for the record.
Good evening, Carolyn Jaramillo. Good evening, Council. I'm a member of Pacifica Social Justice. The Chief presents 3 proposals tonight to connect residents of Pacifica with the police department. However, we feel that these 3 proposals do not really connect the people in the right way. And rather than spend a great deal of time going through the reasons that we want to reject these proposals, we'd also like to spend some time promoting 2 areas of safety being studied and piloted in jurisdictions across California and the country. Therefore, we're asking the city to consider reallocating money the PD spends on juvenile services to provide professional counseling services to schools. And secondly, to create a non-police crisis intervention team of clinicians. Police do not decide to become police officers in order to be school counselors or mental health specialists. Police are trained primarily to control situations with control tools such as handcuffs, tasers, and guns. This type of training and these tools are not helpful when a person suffers a crisis. Indeed, this training and these tools have frequently led to tragic results, as we saw in the case of Earl Chang. More and more people are supporting programs that send teams of mental health professionals rather than police to respond to crises of mental health, addiction, or homelessness. Taxpayers, seeing 1/3 of the city's budget going to the police department, are asking for smarter, more compassionate, effective ways to provide safety. They are urging city leaders to take a look for bold ways to improve their cities with less contact with police. We recommend that the city study the community-driven projects currently working in Santa Clara County, San Francisco, Los Angeles, Denver, Eugene, Oregon, and to pay special attention to the alternative program being recommended by Daly City for Black Lives. I also recommend that anyone studying police issues study very carefully the videos being produced by the ACLU on these very issues. Thank you.
Thank you.
Suzanne Moore, you'll be up next, followed by George Carpenter. Suzanne, please state your name for the record.
Thanks, Elizabeth. Suzanne Moore. I echo some of the previous speakers and their remarks, so I'll be brief. In the June City Council study session on policing, I heard 4 community concerns that stood out. The first was addressing racial bias, gathering data, training officers, and monitoring progress. The second was creating a Pacifica crisis intervention team headed by a mental health professional. The third one I heard was remove police officers from our school and replace them with a mental health counselor. Seems really important right now as students and teachers are returning from shelter in place. And 4, change existing use of force policies, such as banning firing at or from moving vehicles and ban use of tear gas, tasers, and rubber bullets. It seems to me the next logical step is to petition the public for feedback on these 4 concerns and then summarize them for community input. The 3 community engagement tools seem to interrupt the conversation that began with our community. I recommend that you re-engage the public, and I suggest the 3 tools be voted down. Thank you.
Thank you.
George Carpenter, we'll hear from you next, followed by username Clara. Please state your name for the record. We've lost him. George, are you there?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Hi, my name is George Carpenter, and I'm a resident of Pacifica in District 1. If the City Council approves Chief Stidle's proposals, then I feel like we've completely lost sight of the goals in the Obama Pledge taken by City Council on June 17th, 2020. After the killing of George Floyd, the City of Pacifica took this pledge to evaluate its use of force policies and to listen to public comment. At this study session, 41 people spoke out, and that's not including anonymous folks, calling for immediate radical change to the current racist policies practiced by the Pacifica Police. In response to this public outcry for defunding and reallocating resources, making available racial statistics at traffic stops, an unarmed crisis intervention team, the banning of certain weapons, and getting cops out of schools, the city has given our chief of police the platform to propose new policies, none of which address any of these issues. Chief Seidel has capitalized on the spirit of the George Floyd movement, attempting to increase funding for his department. This hurts taxpayers and quite literally hurts Black and brown folks. I urge the City Council to reject these non-proposals and to understand how weighted this conversation has been in favor of the Pacifica PD. Chief Steidel has been given all the time and resources, somewhere between $200,000 and $300,000 a year, to defend his job and colleagues, while public response is reduced to 3-minute comments that seem to fall on deaf ears. In the next meeting, please, let's give activists that platform to propose policing alternatives, the savings defunding and reallocating has on the taxpayer, and the safety and security it would provide for Black and brown folks in Pacifica. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Clara, you're our next speaker. You'll be followed by Renee.
Hello. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, my name is Clara Davis. I am a constituent of Pacifica living in District 1. And I would also like to echo the views of my fellow Pacificans. I find all 3 of these proposals to be laughable, considering what conversations led to them, which were all about the racial bias and profiling that has existed in the Pacifica Police Department. If Chief Steidel really cared about communication, then he would realize that nothing that he said was even asked for in either of these meetings. I suggest that all 3 of these be rejected, and that we also instead investigate ways that we can defund the police and take money and for funding healthcare workers outside of the Pacifica PD. Thank you.
Thank you.
Renee, you're our next speaker, followed by Delia McGrath. Please state your name for the record.
Hi, my name is Renee, and I'm I grew up here in Pacifica and continue to live here today. I just wanted to express my concern for these proposals that Chief Steidel has just made. I recently reviewed both of the study sessions that we had, and there was a lot of very startling accounts of how racism has happened as a result of the Pacifica PD, a lot of racial profiling, a lot of people afraid of the Pacifica Police Department. And this has failed to address any of these concerns. I haven't heard racism mentioned at all, or the addressal of this topic. Another, and I just, I don't really understand why this is not becoming a discussion. It feels like all these proposals are a complete sidestep to what the community has been asking in these multiple sessions. I also want to mention that Chief Steidel had said before that they're not well equipped to deal with mental health services. And to just reiterate some of what the other Pacifica social justice folks have said about really reinvesting and kind of shifting funds away from the police department into mental health services. I think there's a lot of good that can come from, instead of trying to form a community police academy, towards actually providing some much needed mental health services to the community. And it's a lot easier to provide mental health services when people aren't armed or trained by people that are armed. It just seems like with the Community Police Academy too, that there's more concern about whether people understand that policing is hard, or whether people like the Pacifica Police or not, rather than addressing the reasons as to why people might feel this way about the police, which again is racism, excessive use of force, and implicit bias. I also wanted to make a note about oversight committee, that having oversight committees hasn't statistically proven to work or have any additional effect on changing policing. And it certainly is not going to have any effect if the people that are on these kinds of committees are appointed by the police. It doesn't really seem like there's any point to that. So thank you.
Thank you.
Delia McGrath, you're our next speaker. Please state your name for the record.
Good evening, Council. My name is Delia McGrath. Thank you for letting me have this opportunity to speak. I am, like all the previous speakers on this topic, disappointed in the presentation and the proposals that Chief Steidel made this evening. I don't think that these proposals address the important policing issues that were brought up by the community in the June 2020 study session, which I attended and participated in. In particular, I'm concerned about the racial bias in policing that was clearly articulated by the public at that time. The 3 community engagement tools being offered divert your attention away from what is really needed in favor of low-impact community education projects, which will benefit but a few residents of our community. These proposals won't address the real problems in Pacifica that need your attention. I recommend that you not accept the proposals and move in the forward direction of addressing the racial bias in the police department. It's also a high priority to create a crisis intervention team with mental health professionals. I am personally a retired mental health professional, and I know from years of experience in community mental health how important it is to have highly trained, highly skilled professionals who can be much more effective in de-escalating mental health crises. I also hope that you would approve of an upgraded harm reduction policies instead of the use of force policies currently in use by the Pacifica Police Department. So I thank you for your kind consideration of my point of view and my input, as well as the many speakers who preceded me. I think they spoke well to this same attitude that we want something much more important. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mayor Beckmeyer, I do not see any other comments at this time.
All right, so I will close public comment and bring it back to council.
Mayor,
Yes.
Kevin Woodhouse, City Manager, I just wanted to offer a comment because I think it might help put this discussion in context, and Chief Steidel can add to it if he chooses. A lot of the commenters spoke about a variety of issues that were raised in the very first Policing in Pacifica session that we had in June. And then we went and we worked on and researched and came back to the council in August addressing a lot of those issues with, I think, kind of a 10-point work plan that the council directed that the Pacifica PD pursue. And many of those issues, like bias training, et cetera, are on that work plan. The item, and maybe part of the confusion tonight, is that at the August session, the council also requested specific information back about the 3 items that are addressed in this report. So the more limited scope of this report and discussion tonight is intended to be about those 3 specific items that the council directed we bring back. Next month or the month after, as the chief has promised, he will be doing periodic or annual reports out on how progress is occurring on the other items on the work plan. So I hope that provides some context to it's not that we didn't hear the concerns of the community or the council didn't hear the concerns of the community. It's that the council specifically directed more information come back about these 3 items at this time. And that's what we're bringing back. And I'll stop there if the chief wants to add anything. But I thought that might help with context.
Thank you. Chief, did you want to add anything?
So if I may, I'll let Madam Mayor determine if this is the appropriate time. You know, I agree with everything the city manager Woodhouse said there. We did bring back exactly what we were directed to per the conversation. The other items were things that have been vetted through the city council. And there were all, as the city manager said, there were also other things that we promised that we were going to do that I will be speaking to what our progress is. I would imagine late March, beginning of April, as we promised we would do. There were a couple of items that came up that I'm sure that our good speakers had to talk about tonight that I think that if I could just touch on real fast, I think that the city council would likely have questions about them, as there have been questions in the past. Would that be appropriate?
It's fine with me. Yes, I think that would be useful. And then if there are follow-on questions from council, we'll get to
Okay, very good. Thank you. So one of the themes that I heard from a few speakers, and I continue to get questions about, is about removing officers from schools. We do not have officers in schools. We have no officers assigned to schools. When we had a school resource program, it was incredibly effective. It was good. We had a great relationship with the students and the administrators. Unfortunately, we don't have nearly as many officers as we used to, and I can't afford to put officers in schools. What we do have is a program where officers working during day shift are assigned schools, and they contact the school administration a couple times a week, and they have that communication to see if there's any way the police department can assist the school with anything. We're not on the campus all day long. We do not have assigned school resource officers. The second topic that came up, and it did come up, I do recognize at the June 17th and the August 25th, is the important gathering of data. Gathering of data regarding stops, especially traffic stops, pedestrian stops, times when officers, especially, are self-initiating contact with people. As I stated at both of those meetings, we are on the path to meet the legal requirement. It's not as simple as just flipping a switch in our computer to make this stuff searchable or to make this stuff that we can, information that we can readily gather. I know that sometimes community members don't understand that. It's also going to be an expensive process. We've already issued a personal purchase order to our vendor, as the other agencies in San Mateo County are doing, as we all use the same vendor, or almost all of us use the same vendor for our records management system, to make sure that we can get this done. We've already formed a committee within the police department that's going to discuss how we do this, how we train it, and how we can hopefully start a little bit early. I'm hoping by late fall or very early winter, so we can test drive it and make sure that we're going to be able to comply with the state law and give the community the information they want. And just a reminder, we're required by state law to begin gathering this data, have our systems up and running, as well as our data gathering methodologies or methods in place that our officers will be using and be ready to go by January 1st. We have to be, on point by then. So once that data gathering starts, we will be able to report out to the community once these reports are generated and this data can be interpreted to provide exactly the information the community is asking for. And again, as I've talked about in past meetings, and I know the command staff, we believe that Assembly Bill 953 is a good thing. We think it's going to show that we're doing our jobs correctly. However, if something were to pop up there that we didn't see, then I think it'd be an excellent tool so that we can address any issues within our department. The final thing was the mental health response. Many of the speakers have spoke about that. They're absolutely right. Your police officers aren't mental health professionals. We send them to CIT training, crisis intervention training, and we have nearly all of our officers, not everybody yet, but almost everybody has been trained with this CIT training. However, it certainly doesn't replace a mental health professional being available. So, and I think most police departments, most communities understand this. So right now, there's a program that's getting up and running, a pilot program in San Mateo County, where 4 or 5 agencies, the large agencies, of course, that the money's been invested through the county in, where there will be a full-time, meaning 40-hour a week, 8 or 9 to 5, mental health worker, clinician within the police department station there that will have a county vehicle that will respond when necessary with an officer. It's a two-pronged program, understanding that many of our mental health folks with mental health, we're getting called when the crisis is occurring, and a mental health worker is not going to walk into that scene alone. But having that mental health worker available, maybe when a police officer is not needed, is a great tool. And also, even when a police officer is needed, to have somebody with that knowledge and that experience there is a good thing. So we're hoping it's a 2-year pilot program. We're hoping that it goes well. The Chiefs Association, we're hoping that it goes well, and we're hoping that it's something that can be expanded, of course. I think we'd all be interested in something like that if it were able to come to fruition. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Okay, council members, let's hear from Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you. Thank you, Chief Steidel. So I was very concerned that our community was going to react the way that they have just reacted when it wasn't very clear that our police department is actually working on the work plan that we have asked them to start working on. And so I think maybe in the future, it's going to be really important for that kind of transparency so people understand exactly what is being worked on as far as bias training and all the other things that were brought up by our public tonight. They're all super important. And so I don't want our community to think that we didn't hear you and that we didn't react to the things that you're requesting, because we have heard you and we are reacting and we are working to make sure that all of those things are addressed. And they do take time, and I know that's frustrating. I'm glad that Chief brought up the school resource officer, because I know that there's no school resource officers. But I do want to mention that our mental health. So I work with the Daly City Youth Health Center. So I just want the community to understand that there's going to be almost between 3 and 4 additional mental health practitioners available at each of our school campuses in September. So there's people that are working on increasing the mental health services for our young people. So I just wanted to make sure that that was understood too. Again, I think the important thing for me is to understand the work plan and to understand all the work that is being done. I have a hard time commenting on the things that we're talking about tonight, but I will get around to that in a minute. So thanks for hearing me out.
Thank you. Other comments or questions? Councilmember O'Neill.
I just kind of wanted to reiterate what Mayor Pro Tem Mary Beer said. When I was on the school board, I was there when we had the school resource officer. And it was an excellent excellent service that we had from the Pacifica Police Department, and they were not there full time. They came whatever the schedule was, and stuff. But it was very good. Was very instrumental in several different incidents that helped Pacifica get through an issue. So, and yes, there are no police. I mean, obviously they respond if there's an incident there now, but there is no full-time police in there on the campuses. In regards to saying no to the police academy, I would support more a robust city to talk about all the different aspects of the city. However, the chief said it was $6,000 to $7,000 to do $6,000 to $7,000 to do each session of the police academy, and twice a year. So that's $12,000, and I don't know how much time that's going to buy in a mental health professional being on board. So I think it is good to have the general public interact with the police academy type of thing. And you can't turn this stuff around on a dime. I mean, they're working on it. They have a couple programs getting started, Mary said in September, and they have county people. But what about the backup? Okay, so you bring the mental health professional to the crisis scene at that point, but then who takes them away? The police in handcuffs to book them at the county jail? You need the support services and the backup behind the guy in the field and to provide the services adequately. And so it just takes some time. I'm not saying I'm against any of it. I think alternative means delivery should all be explored. Okay, but I think you do need to take and give it some time to be worked out. I mean, that our first meeting was in June. It's what, 7 months? Let's see, 6, 7, 8, 9 months later. And there seems to be a roadmap in place, and they're taking action. And one of the things that the chief of police is asking for is a chief of police advisory or police advisory committee. And some of those people will be doing exactly what the public just said they wanted, to see what the public wants, to advise the chief of police on the next moves.
Yeah, thank you. Councilmember Vatterlas, did you have a comment?
Yes, this is public input. When we have these meetings, the public comes and gives input. I would like to thank Mayor Pro Tem for explaining the process so that people understand the process in a more smooth fashion. Also, the comparisons to San Francisco and Los Angeles and even Daly City, which has 3 times the number of people we do, and probably 3 times the police force, maybe 4. We have an extremely small police force that does everything they can to serve our city. And I think that we're talking apples and oranges here. And that's it for right now.
Thank you. Councilmember Big Stick.
Thank you very much. First, I want to echo what Mayor Pro Tem Beer was saying. I think it would have been very helpful if there had been like a preamble or an acknowledgement in the staff report where the connections were, and I wasn't there, and so it's helpful for me also. I was at one of the meeting more robustly than the other. And I'm struck by how much hurt I hear in the community. And my experience largely, I know, is very different from a lot of members of the community. And so at any given time, I don't know where that hurt is directly connected to an experience they had here, or a hurt that we've all been feeling nationally for how long. And again, I don't know that. But what I am hearing expressed clearly in my community is a lot of pain going on, a lot of hurt that's being expressed. The reason that I arrived in the city council chamber for the second time, really the reason I'm sitting here right now, is because of the death of Errol Chang. For me, that was really shocking. It was during the time that Ferguson was going on, and the resounding thought in my head was, how could something like this happen in my community? Chief, this might come out of left field. Our mayor at the time was Mary Ann Nyhart, and I know that she quite actively worked to connect mental health with the incident that happened in that moment. Do you remember, or are the gears still in motion such that you can relate a little of what happened since that moment in time, what Mary Ann did in that moment, and the effect maybe it has to this day?
Well, Mary Ann, given her profession, was able to talk to us a little bit more about and connect us with services in the county. But the main turning point for us was Pacifica was a founding member of a collaborative that we're still part of that meets that law enforcement. The group is law enforcement, clinicians. I've talked to emergency room doctors, nurses, EMTs, firefighters, people that we have one thing in common. We all have contact with the same folks that have mental health issues. And what we had found in this county for a long time is there were all these different services available, but one hand was not talking to another. And when we sat down with the initial of these meetings, which was, I want to say the Earl Chang case, I want to say it was about 6 months after that, if my memory recollection is correct. And we sat across the room from people, and there was a lot of blank stares. And there was a lot of blank stares because there were some clinicians and doctors that had no idea what we did, and we had no idea what they did, much less what resources they could provide us. And I've actually made presentations and talked about this issue before council in the past to talk about instances where we've utilized that program. We've utilized the connections we've made based on the services we know. One occasion absolutely saved a life, no doubt in my mind. Somebody that was in possession of a replica firearm that absolutely we would have been confronted with sometime, that probably would not have ended well. But because of the system we have in place now, we were able to intervene. And I guess the theme of what I'm trying to say is the way we operate is we understand that if all these different disciplines have contact with these people, we need to be communicating with these people. And we also have a program that one of my captains goes to and talks about. It's called the Field Crisis Collaborative. It now meets monthly with the DA's office, DHRS, Life's Moves, probation. Again, we talk about these people that have come on our radar and what we can do to intervene. When you have a situation that requires a large law enforcement presence because something is going very, very bad, oftentimes you're deep into the crisis and it's too late. What we're trying to do is reach people before they ever get to that crisis situation. Before we ever get that phone call from a family member saying, he's got a knife, he's got an axe, he's got a gun, and it's going bad. And we get out there and we're faced with an immediate crisis situation that we know that the clinician's not going to walk into a house with somebody that has a gun in their hand or a knife in their hand and do something magical that's going to de-escalate that. Now, that does not take away from, even in a major crisis incident like that, we would still be utilizing those people for advice, bringing them to the scene if we could and saying, okay, this is what we have. What can you tell us about this person? These are the tactics we're considering. What should we be thinking about right now? So even in a crisis situation where it's already started to go bad, and apparently we haven't reached that person yet, we would utilize these resources in our decision-making process, unless there was an immediate life or death situation where we had to act. So talking about from back then in several years ago and now, it's night and day. It's night and day to what's available to us. It's night and day as to what's available to us in this county and the communication that's occurring.
Okay, thank you. I have a couple comments I'd like to make and then a question. I am going to echo from the folks that we heard from tonight and from the email that I received. The themes that I heard repeated, and I would ask that we are going to have an update on these items in the larger report, the work plan as you were describing it. I heard concerns about racism in the department. Excessive use of force is a concern. The question of implicit bias, and another person phrased it as racial bias in policing. And I heard the emotions expressed of disappointment and a sense of not being heard. And that seems like a theme that, you know, we've heard a lot about. We heard it about capital projects. You know, people feel like they're, you know, potential development projects in town. People feel like they're not being heard. So, you know, I don't have a direct answer other than to say this is something I'm keeping at the top of my list, and thinking about transparency and over communicating in some ways. Maybe this is something that came up with the school district where I work through the COVID. You know, there's so many different moving parts. There's so many different elements, and you might be in a specific meeting and hear something, or it might be information that was theoretically going to be passed down through the superintendent's office to the et cetera. And the idea was, and repeatedly brought up, about over communicating so that we know the word is getting out. And it may be that we have a, you know, I realize it takes a lot of time to put agendas together and look at those communication opportunities. But I think that if we can develop a good format, a bullet point list from the items that we heard that the city manager referred back to from the August meeting, and create kind of a template where we're including updated information on each of those items, it would be helpful, because there could be people who weren't there for those meetings and didn't realize these conversations went on, and to refresh everyone's memory about what the items are. So I'm going to ask for that in the upcoming report out that we're going to have in a few months. For me, I need a reiteration, and I think you touched on most of it, Chief, about the deadline dates for the data gathering process. It sounds like you need to be ready to go with that program in place for January 1 of 2022. I'm not sure if I'm accurate about that. And this is the program that results from AB 953. I remember from the meeting when you were describing, I think it was the August meeting, that there were a lot of questions about the gathering of data about race upon stops, you know, and the difference between an officer assigning that for purposes of documentation and an individual giving their position, and you know, different disciplines treat this whole thing very differently. So I think that's a disconnect for some people. But what I am hearing is across the board, there's a need for more data, more information. So it seems like those wheels are in motion. With regard to the comment about, or the you know, reflection from the city manager about the reason this item's on the agenda tonight is that it's an answer to what council asked for. I have to tell you that I didn't remember it that way, and I appreciate you reminding me of that. because I do remember that the idea of community police academy, and the three different options that you presented tonight, I remember hearing the names of them, and I don't feel like we had an opportunity that night to delve into much detail. So I feel like tonight is, in fact, that detail. I recall hearing your description at the time, Chief, about the police academy, and my first thought was it needs a new name, because it didn't strike me the way you described what it was. The name didn't sound like what it was named. But what I'm hearing from the community is they don't feel like the folks that spoke tonight, they don't feel like that's what is needed. And so I'm not sure, I can't, say it is. Yes, it is. It's absolutely needed. I think what I would ask instead, and this is the question I had, is how are these updates being disseminated to the community at this point? Like, what are the methods by which there's tonight, right? There's council meetings and follow-ups and report outs in that way. But is there some sort of a other community meeting that occurs? Are you invited to speak, or are your officers invited to speak at groups? Or could they make themselves available? I realize we're in COVID, so it's a whole different ballgame right now. But in terms of that outreach and opening up that communication, what are our opportunities for that is really the first question I have, because it seems like we may already have some opportunities built in that we're not maybe taking full advantage of.
So to answer that question, we take the opportunities when they can as they come up. There are the typical type of things that one would expect. People aren't meeting. We're not meeting in person. We have I've spoken myself and met at the school board of the Pacifica School District. We're currently meeting and have enjoyed conversation with the good people at the Social Unity Project. Thanks to Mary for that connection. We have, and again, a lot of the conversations we're having right now are one-on-one with people or small groups of people, but it's very limited in that, again, it's difficult for us to pound the pavement, if you will, to get out there to meet one-on-one. One of the things that I would bring up, about the community academy concept is that, we talk about. It's interesting how many times this comes up in the presentations. Came up last at the fireworks presentation. You have a small group of people, like we're talking about tonight, that don't want the police to do certain things, and you have a small group of people that perhaps do. And then you have 99% of the community that we don't hear from that's in the middle. That's usually where you get your CERT. That's where you get your citizen academy or community academy people. That's the people we're targeting, getting to the everyday folks in that want to know how a police department operates, because it affects them on a daily basis. It affects them when they call us for service. It affects them when they have a traffic problem. The idea is to show them why and what you can expect.
And so in regard to my request for like a template or a checklist, one thing that would be very helpful to me, because I am not right this minute recalling what the implicit bias training is that you're doing. And I know it was once a year, and I remember there were calls for it to be more frequent than that. I wonder if there are other trainings in which those themes are included, so that in fact the concepts are being touched on more than once a year. And so just having a better, or a reminder really, from my point of view, of what those concepts are. And then you described just now a little bit about the group that formed and that met and continues, it sounds like, to meet, and how some of the larger cities in our county have already and are placing a mental health professional with their police departments. But obviously, like so many things, what about the rest of us, right? How do those smaller communities really, I mean, I don't mean to be negative, but how can we come together and support each other around getting that same kind of opportunity? And, obviously tonight, you could get a call, there could be an issue. I was going to ask, like, how do you handle it now? It seems like there was a team or some kind of resource that you can reach out to at the county level if you needed backup, but I can't remember the details of that.
Yes, sir. The psychiatric emergency response team, PERT, that's the team that we use with the person with the mental health issue was carrying around the replica firearm that we intervened with before something could occur. If something were to happen right now as well, and we've actually used them on several occasions by phone where they didn't need to respond, but where they talked us through a few things. We also have connections within the county, within the mental health system, that if we have questions right now, if something bad is developing right now, we have every confidence that we can get a hold of somebody that we need to that could assist us. That's what the programs that have changed over the years are all about. I've actually had, in the recent years, I have had clinicians call us and say, this is kind of reverse, but I have somebody that I think it's about to go into crisis. I need help from your CIT. I want to connect you with them before this gets bad. And can you help me get to this person? So it's worth both ways.
Okay, thank you. Mayor Pro Tem, did you want to add something?
Yeah, I was just going to comment on the pilot program that the county's doing in Daly City and South San Francisco and Redwood City. I think there's another city. It hasn't started yet. It's going to start soon. It's not perfect by any means, especially as far as our community advocates are concerned, but it's a start. And so the question that I also have is, how can we get something started here? And I think that's always going to be our issue, right? Because the smaller cities get overlooked. But what can we do to advocate for that and to pay very close attention on how these pilot programs are working in other cities to see how they can work here? And I like to keep those possibilities open because there is work going on, and I know it's painfully slow, and I'm so sorry about that. It's frustrating for me too. But there is work happening. We just have to make sure that we stay on top of advocating for things to come here. It's super important.
Councilmember Big Stick?
So, another overarching theme is how unsatisfactory this experience is. And we're hearing that from the commenters. And going into this meeting, I had a hunch that there was no way that this could possibly be a satisfactory meeting, because on the one hand, we have a community that's trying to recover from a heck of a lot of pain. And on the other hand, we have a large lack of immediate solutions to address it in the way that the community would crave. And that being said, what I just heard over the last few minutes are a lot of steps we are taking to try and heal those wounds. And so I feel like that's important because we move at the speed of government more often than not, right? Because we have no choice but to. And the speed of government by its nature is resoundingly unsatisfactory, because when an issue happens, we want an instant solution. And what we're trying to create is a lasting solution, which precludes giving that instantaneous satisfaction. So another thing I heard tonight, which is very important, is that this is not the last meeting. This is not the meeting designed to address most of the community's concerns in this issue. This is a meeting to try and take a step forward in the direction that we're trying to go. Again, not the last meeting. Everything that the community brought up, we are actively working on it, and we don't have it here to present to you, which is really unsatisfactory. But what we do have are what's recommended the Academy and the Chief's Advisory Panel. And one commenter said that we want to connect people in the right way is the goal. And personally, I think that connecting people in any way is a really good first step to getting there. I think the academy is, and I was listening for that price tag. It's a fairly modest price tag, so that community has a little bit more understanding how our policing works in our community. And then, for all y'all who made comments today, take the classes. Then when you show up to talk to us, you will have a much more informed way of saying, these are the things that now we know even more you're not doing the way we would like you to. We can pinpoint exactly where you can make that effort. Or, you will know how to use our department as even more of a tool. For the advisory panel, I was very interested when I heard it and have talked to the chief a little bit about the idea of equity, because if we're going to do a chief's advisory panel, I really want to make sure that that advisory panel is diverse and represents our community even more than merely the neighborhoods, because a lot of the feedback we've been hearing has so much to do with racial bias. And I feel like if there's something woven into that advisory panel where it tries to address that by virtue of taking as diverse a crew as possible, maybe then that tool, which is a good step insofar as it's asking for community engagement, could be taken that next step to maybe just try and touch upon what the community craves, which is resolving any racial bias we have in our community. And then after that, this line really, it resonated with me: connect people in the right way. And I think that what the chief has put on the table is a way to connect people in helpful ways. But the point is well taken that may not at all be satisfactory to what the community joining us tonight has in mind. And so I invite you, please email me, email the rest of the council. We'll be happy to meet with you socially distanced, or, when we're all vaccinated otherwise, to get your input. What is the correct way? Because the point is very well taken. If you are afraid of talking with a police officer, you're not going to want to join the academy. You're not going to apply for the advisory panel. And, it's hard for us from where we're at right here to say these are the right ways to connect you. But you, who aren't necessarily fond of communicating with police officers this week, might have a very good sense of what a better way of connecting up in the right way looks like, in a way that, is you're not afraid, that you're not coming from a place of pain, but we can connect you and we can really meet each other on the community level. Because I think that's what all of this stems from, these ideas, is the idea of the community engaging with police and police engaging with community in ways that are positive, in ways that we're working together rather than at odds with each other. And that's what we're trying to accomplish. And I think these are good ideas to begin that. But if these ideas aren't what it takes, reach out to us and let us know what it takes so that we can figure this out together. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Anything else? I'm looking at.
So it kind of sounded like a member Big Stick was almost making a motion.
Yeah, that's what I'm looking at. Is like, do we have the recommended action?
Well, basically what it was is for us to discuss the 3 items, and do we want to accept the report and then give direction on the 3 items that was mentioned, or do we just want to follow up with what was recommended by the city manager and chief of police? So 2 issues: 1, accept the report; 2, of the 3, do we want to accept the city manager and chief of police's recommendation? I think this is more a sense of the council than a vote, correct?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I'm willing to accept the report and the chief of police and city manager's recommendation as a start to start the dialogue of an advisory group, which was articulated by Tiger very well.
I agree with you.
Boy, are you full of yourself? Just sitting there thinking that you get a compliment and you have to say, I agree with me.
And
No, I said thank you. Trying to thank you.
Always cuts out at the very beginning.
I'm talking now. I'm going to talk.
Sorry.
Maybe we can include how those folks are being chosen, rather than having the city manager and the chief of police choose them, maybe we can talk about a different way to do that. That's just more.
Well, excuse
Oh.
me.
Michelle.
Attorney.
Suggestion that will change the whole process for adopting. That means we would bring back to the council, and the council would appoint the committee, and it would be a council charge, not necessarily what city manager and the police chief have recommended is that this be a staff, police chief and city manager organized and developed program. If the council's interested in having a program organized and created by the council, that would be a different discussion, and that we would need to bring a different item back to the council because that's not on the agenda for tonight.
So you're speaking of having it created similar to what the unhoused task force was, Michelle.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Correct. This type of a program is patterned or mirrored off of the UP task force program that we have in place.
Thank you, Michelle.
Madam Mayor Pro Tem, if I could interject there, kind of along the lines of what I think that you were getting at and what Councilmember Big Stick was getting at in terms of the people on there. I'll just offer, and I probably should have brought this up earlier. This is something that will have to be well thought out between the city manager and myself. Something that's likely going to go beyond the normal means of communication, beyond in terms of recruiting folks from the different neighborhoods. I'm talking not just social media or Connect with Pacifica, which are good means of communication, but I'm talking about utilizing the different contacts we have, the Social Unity Project, different groups within the community that can help us get the word out so that we can, get a diverse group of stakeholders. We certainly can't make anybody come be part of the panel, but we can certainly try different avenues of communication to be sure that we're reaching all the groups within Pacifica to give everybody the opportunity that wants to be part of this program to do so.
If I could add, because I think it's important, since the Unhousing Pacifica Task Force concept was raised, this is similar in some ways, but very different in other ways, because a really important component here is this is an informal panel for communication and dialogue and being a sounding board with the police chief. In reality, anyone in the community has the ability to request and meet with the chief, or meet with me, or meet with a council member to share their concerns. And so if they're not formally on the police chief's panel, they still can communicate directly with the city through many different avenues. And this is about communication. The Unhoused in Pacifica Task Force had a very specific task that it was working on. This is about communication between the community and the police and the city. So in that way, I just wanted to point out that it's very different that way.
Okay.
So
I'm going to go back to something Mayor Pro Tem said in regard to, the folks that are on the advisory panel. The way it's described here, it says, city manager and chief will move forward and establish guidelines and appointment criteria, interview and select panelists, and report back to council once the advisory panel is established. And then I heard city attorney say, if council is going to get in the business of directing what that looks like, it's not going to be what's described here today. It's going to be something else. So what I did here that I didn't read, so I'm going to ask please to add this word to your thinking. And I hope this meets with the city attorney. Diverse representation. And, you know, I know you think that already, but to explicitly request that you consider that as part of your task. I know that's right on the border of directing, but this would be my request. And I think it's consistent with what I heard from the community tonight.
It's also consistent with, I hope I explained it well, consistent with exactly what I was just saying.
Mm-hmm.
And I would just say that I think that that would be consistent with the direction that staff has proposed in the staff report. So I think that added clarification is appropriate.
All right, so I'm looking for a nod of heads of council members that we think this is a good idea to move forward with this advisory panel. Yes? Okay. We don't think it's I didn't hear anyone say this. I will say the third item that was recommended was, or not recommended, was not recommending the formation of a police oversight committee or commission. And so I'm looking for shaking of heads as to no, we don't think that's a good idea. And I'm seeing 4 shaking of heads and 1 uncertainty.
When I'll abstain from that shaking
1
of.
abstention. Okay, so that straight head is an abstention. Okay. And then
Well, but Madam Mayor, we're not voting. So all we need is a majority.
you're not. I'm just looking for guidance.
That there's a minority, or we're just looking for direction. The council really isn't taking any action tonight.
Okay, we're just looking for direction. Do we feel we have the direction we need? Staff?
I believe the manager does have the direction that he needs.
Okay, then I think we're concluded with this item. And I would just like to, before we adjourn, say that we lost another community member recently. And this person worked for the city, is retired from the city, and served the community in a lot of ways for a very long time. Her name was Mary Broom Merrill, and she worked in the Parks, Beaches, and Recreation department. And she, upon retirement, and she served for 20 years, and Director Perez will give us more detail, but I just want to say that, you know, upon her retirement, like so many people in the community, she kept serving and became very, very active with the Pacificans Care. And that's how I ever first knew her, is in that context. So, it's, you know, when I hear the details of how a person, you know, the earlier part of their career, it's always so interesting to me, and it really makes sense. But we know how wonderfully supportive Pacificans Care has been and continues to be for our community. So I know that her memory will live on in that action and in that work. Director Perez, did you have some comments that you wanted to add?
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor and City Council members. So yeah, Mary Brum Merrill, she was hired in '89 and worked for the city for 20 years until she retired 12 years ago. She started out in as the food services coordinator with the senior services division. She was the senior services supervisor, and then for the last 5 years, she was the director of Parks, Beaches, and Recreation. And I followed in her footsteps directly. She led the staff and efforts to improve recreation programs and facilities, and by establishing and maintaining a plan to use the funds from the Roy Davies Trust. And when she was the director, that's when we received those funds, as well as she was supported the completion of the Pacifica Skate Park project, which happened during her tenure as well. Her collaboration with local community groups was integral in strengthening partnerships and fostering community development. Her vitality and enthusiasm was instrumental in inspiring her staff and commissioners to be involved, to be positive, and be productive. She helped to enhance the quality of life for Pacificans, working really hard to preserve the dignity of our aging adults, as well as protecting the interests of our youth. She was a very talented artist, and we were lucky enough to have her display her works at the community center many times. In fact, probably the largest or the best selling art show we had was one of her creating. Just fabulous stuff that she did. And as the mayor mentioned, after she retired, she continued working for the community, and she served 10 years on the Pacificans Care Board of Directors. Her family was very important to her, and she clearly loved her family and enjoyed being a mother and grandmother. And on a personal note, I worked with Mary for the entire time that she worked with the city of Pacifica, and very closely, in particular, the last 5 years that she was here. And she was just a wonderful person, kind, caring, great sense of humor, really funny and full of life. And she is definitely going to be truly missed. She was very well liked by all of us and very inspiring. So thank you for giving me the opportunity.
Thank you. And unless there are other comments, we will adjourn the meeting in her honor and in her memory. So meeting adjourned at 10:01 p.m. Thank you.